Ba, ba, ba. Let's see who's here.
Around it that haven't been
And
used.
and people are, oh,
No, I don't
you just throw some coffee
well,
down.
no, it's just- I don't
That seems like a
coffee,
waste
so-
of money.
No, a friend of mine left a whole brand new case.
Oh, that's
can of it. And I
hilarious.
was like, I don't drink coffee like that. So I just took the grounds and I threw it
That's
around
too
the plant.
funny.
And I was like, I
How
don't know
do
if it's hi.
you? I'm like, that seems like a waste. You're gonna have a friend at some point that comes and wants a cup of coffee.
No, no, I don't have a coffee maker. It's probably why she left it.
Oh,
I
that's
don't have a coffee
hilarious.
maker.
That's
I
too
have a
funny.
I have a teapot that boils water.
Yeah.
And I pour it in my tea thing. But I
That
don't have a
doesn't
coffee
work so
maker.
great. Yeah,
No coffee maker. So
that's too
she came to
funny.
visit from Memphis, and then she left it because I was like, I don't know coffee.
That's too funny.
She better go up the street nothing.
Yeah, right. There's no shortage of coffee shops. So.
Nope. Nope.
We don't do coffee in my house.
Whatever I drink like espresso in like a latte or once in a while, but I don't do coffee. Like I don't. I mean, this is new to me even drinking a latte. But like I said, a friend of mine, I was asking about it. Like so people say they put the coffee grounds around the plants. I was like, can I do it without brewing the coffee? I don't know coffee.
My fiance drinks coffee, so when I move in with him, I will have it for my plants. But
Yes, so the
me?
excess. Yeah.
I was told to go see the garden.
Oh yes, please
I
go that way. Sorry, bust out the back door there. And actually, I say that I could probably unlock the gate so people can go that way too.
I'm gonna make squealing noises all night. I said I'm gonna make squealing noises all night. I just get so excited.
Are you going through Are you gonna be in foundations or doing any other classes?
I'm doing the 101 class next, the Western herbalism.
So I mean, are you gonna do the 6 months? Are you gonna do the foundations?
Yeah, I am gonna end up doing it.
Oh, I'll see you there. I'm retaking it and starting. Well, I took 101 again in February, and I'm starting back to do the 6 months of foundation this month again. Oh, yeah. I wasn't ready. I mean,
What's your name?
Desiree. I'm sorry. Nice to meet
Nice to meet you.
you. Yeah, I love it. A nerd. I'm like. I left, left like I went to walk to the beach with a friend of mine, and
Hey, Betsy. Hi, all. I see new faces. I love it.
because I was
Guess I better make sure my volume's up, huh?
So,
My fiance called me. Are you on your way to class? I'm like, yes.
yep.
And I'm getting a copper still made for myself.
Oh, are you?
We have a friend out in Arizona that makes them.
Oh,
What do
nice.
they do?
Well, he brews, my fiance brews moonshine in it.
Oh, cool.
And I will do other things. Mine is smaller, his is
Okay.
massive. So
These things.
I told him
That's plenty big for us.
yeah.
Does she do her fire starting yet? No, okay.
No, that's really just a vinegar, like a tincture.
Oh, fire cider.
Yeah, Renee makes fire cider. I haven't tried it yet. But
You didn't make any yet? It's so easy.
I don't know how to make it. Remember she when she was telling us about it, somehow
It's
we
in you.
couldn't do it.
I mean, yeah, there's the Renee way, and then there's like the
Well, no,
Rosemary
but-
Glad Star, where it's in the book,
No,
because it takes a year for her to make hers.
no, no. I'm waiting. That's why I said I'm waiting. It's okay.
Just you like you can look it up online,
Uh-huh.
throw it in a blender, pour some vinegar on there,
Keep it moving.
buzz it,
Okay.
stick it in a jar, set it aside. Longer's better.
Well,
But
we got eight. We have 8 people. I have 8 people who I just need 2 more. I think she said 10.
For what?
I want her to do it. I need her to do a cooking class.
Mm.
And so I know literally between me and Johnny, we got 8 people.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm like, I just 2 more people. I will. Yeah, I want to do a. I want her to do a cooking class.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because he wants to bring his sons. His sons are probably 17. Wants to bring them.
Renee just
They cook. They already cook.
Renee just said, "I'll totally do a cooking class again."
Oh, did she can hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's
Renee,
on.
I'm ready. We ready. Oh yeah, we were just talking about this, but literally me and John were talking about it last weekend, and I was like, we need 2 more people. I said, I want one. I'm ready. Because I really want to.
That was a fun. I say it was a fun one. I didn't do anything. I just sat there and handed food around.
I want to learn about how to cook better with herbs. I mean, I know I can read the books.
Renee said
I'm not
hi.
the kind of learner. I'm ready. Oh, since she's here real quick, ask her does she know about somehow I'll ask her.
Oh man, this time. Mm. Oh, I guess. I got a marker or 6. Oh. Mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. No. Oh. Ah. Hey, Natalie.
Has she heard of a place called Linde
Yeah,
in Costa Rica?
yeah. She's been.
Because I want it's a lady I'm following. She's giving classes there
Yeah,
in August, and I was going to see that she
Yeah.
recommended.
definitely. That's a bigger conversation.
Okay, I'll
So yeah,
I'll
just definitely. Whenever you see her face to face, that's definitely a face to face.
okay.
More than a 30-second conversation.
No, I'm fine with that. No, we've been talking before, but then I happened to be watching something the other day. from
And
her.
she'll have opinions about who's teaching.
Well, I won't ask her. I wanted to ask her about the lady and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and that. So,
yeah, definitely.
They'll be face to face. I'll see y'all in 2 weeks.
All right.
You know, foundation.
Oh yeah. I don't know what day it is.
I'm ready.
All right, we got what 101 is next week,
Mhm.
and then then foundations. Somewhere in there, I got Chinese and I think something else.
Yep. So for the Chinese do, and I know y'all told us, but do they go to the students go to Western first and then
They don't have
like,
to.
like advanced Western and then Chinese, or can you go straight to?
No, some people just start straight in the Chinese with no foundation whatsoever.
Doing the flower essence, I got more interested in acupuncture points
Oh, funny.
than I was.
Then you thought, yeah,
Yeah, no, now
that's
I'm
super
like,
funny.
now I still don't get the tongue thing, but I'm gonna get that better this time. But
Yeah.
I understand it, but I don't get it. But no, it made more sense with when we talked about it wow, yes,
Cool.
and I was like, huh. I mean, what if I should look at the tongue? But I was like, okay.
Straight back. Go right on through.
Yeah, you'll just run out the back door there. Right. Ba-ba-ba. Oh, that's the easier way to let people in. Ha.
Well, when did you guys open this building?
2 years ago, year and a half.
So it was before the pandemic, though.
Yes.
Okay, I just had something.
It was before the pandemic, but I won't say by much.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Which, oops. Hopefully I didn't just delete somebody.
How are you, Bob?
Hi.
Nice to see you.
So many people. We will get started here in just a minute. It is recording. Yay.
Oh, that's right. You have some Zoom people.
Yeah. Oh, God. No, we got a gang. I think we had 55 people
Wow.
who signed up, which is nuts. I appreciate it. Like, hopefully I got something interesting to say.
I've never known that to be a problem.
Yeah, right. I always got some kind of crap to say.
Will it be true? Will it be accurate?
Yeah, technicalities. Yeah, I think we got half online and half here,
Oh, very good.
or something like that. And I see a few more people pulling into the parking lot, so we'll give them a few minutes and then we'll get started. I always like to reward the people who get here on time.
Thanks, Star. Yeah.
We say everything important in the first 5 minutes. Although it might take me a half an hour just to click everybody in. I'm really wearing this mask because I just ate a bunch of pecans. I don't want you to see all the pecans stuck in my teeth.
It's beautiful.
We like it.
You did a good job.
So many people.
Hey, Bob.
Yo.
I would like to say something to everybody and the people online. Is that okay?
Yeah, we got a couple more people just pulling into the parking lot, so I'm going to let them wander in the door.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, nope, loud and clear.
Okay. And so were you asking me to wait?
Yeah, give it another minute. Everybody's kind of getting they're signing in up front, and give it like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Heck, we're still busting them into the chat here.
that's why we have so many people in the chat. We need to make sure that we're going to address that. And so
Yep.
that's one of the reasons. So I'm gonna mute myself. You just tell me when you want me to say.
Oakley dokley. Man. How do? Almost looks like Hollywood Squares on here or something. Is that show even on still?
Sorry, I love that style when you find just the perfect book that you're like, I can't wait to open this thing.
Squealing noises and sighs and
I do too.
I cannot hide anything.
I do too, like 6 when I find a book, especially like.
And I will say, just because we have it doesn't mean we like it.
I understand. I understand. That is a.
We just buy all the books. That's
Or Film Circle, they have the treasure house.
Oh, yeah, that was serious.
Yeah, that one.
I would say I like the one. There's a series of books on medical herbalism that Jill Stansberry is making. That this 2 volume, you can see 2 of the 3 volumes. Yeah, that's it. I
All
believe.
3 are there.
Oh, do we have 3? I didn't remember. Wasn't sure what number.
Oh, there's 3, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what number she was up to.
Oh, wow.
Endocrine, cardiac, and respiratory.
Yeah, I like those better, I think, than I love David Hoffman, but I think those are more user friendly. All right, I'm going to yell for people outside to come in, and then
Outside of time, it's in herbal school too. Yeah, that's hard though. Too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you remember to order them later, right? Yep.
all right, we're going to get started here, and we got more people online than we do in person. So welcome all, and I'll say all kinds of craziness here in a minute. Renee, the other half is online moderating from the hacienda because, you know, the dog misses her. So, but Renee, you wanted to say words,
Yeah.
if you're so inclined.
Yeah, I want to because I see a lot of new faces, and so I don't know who's in house with you. I recognize several voices, but I just wanted to let you know.
Some new, some old.
Yep, for everybody who is
Say hi to-
online, we are on a slight delay, and so it doesn't matter even if we've gone past your question. I'll go ahead and shout it out. If I can answer gratuitously, then I'm happy to do so, but I'll always let Bob know so that we can get the great Bob Linde to answer as well. And so even if we've gone past, go ahead and type it in. If you haven't been on Zoom and don't have that working yet, in your bottom left-hand corner is a little microphone with a line through it. Just unmute yourself and speak out. That's acceptable as well if you don't want to type into the chat. But if you're shy to do that or you can't get it working, just go ahead and type in the chat and I'll read it. And we'll go from there. So I wanted to make sure I encourage you to do that and that everybody realizes that there's a slight delay for us at home. So that
Awesome.
you'll go, yeah, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and ask and we'll go back to it as much as we can.
Awesome. Thank you all.
No problem.
And so I see some new faces, or at least I think with masks, who knows? Yeah. Some of you could have been here 100 times. So if you don't know, I'm Bob. And you are sitting at the, I won't say new, but newish and home for the Traditional School of Herbal Studies. And I'm just going to assume that a bunch of you all were at Herb Day, and that's how you found out about this. So yay, Herb Day was last week. Sorry if you didn't make it. If you don't know, there's lots of bathrooms. There's 2 bathrooms out there. One that's not very fancy right behind you in that little hallway. And then there's a tiny one down by the back door. There's hot, cold water. There's tea. Please help yourselves. I do not take offense if you get up and move around. The chairs are not the most comfortable things on the entire planet, and there's pillows in the back room there. You're welcome to go grab a pillow out of one of the bins to cushion your butt or crash out on the floor, whatever. I don't care. It looks like we're shy a few people in person, so hopefully they're making it online for us. Oh yeah, no, I'll go ahead and do it now. If you don't know, and I don't know whether 101 is full yet. I think 101
it is something that you can participate online for.
Okay,
But
so it's all in
in-house,
person.
yeah, in-house, I think we're at our number, but check
Okay.
Patricia, we might have 2 more spots.
Okay, so there's 2 more spots in. So for those of you who want to do more than just grow cool plants, but want to learn what the heck to do with them, Western Herbal 101 is kind of your gateway drug into the beginning of herbalism. And it's our running joke is it's what every mother and grandmother used to know. How do we take care of ourselves? What do we do before CVS? And so it's 30 herbs you can't kill anybody with, and more for those acute kind of issues. And we incorporate a lot of our local plants into the mix as well. A little medicine making, a little bit of other stuff, and generally a fun class. And so 2 slots left in person, and then online is, I won't say unlimited, but kind of. And that is the starting class. If you're like, yeah, that was cool, and you don't want to do anything else, that's cool. If you want to go on from there, that is the requirement for foundations, which is 6 months where we teach diagnostics, another 100 some odd herbs, and way more stuff, and on and on and on into advanced and so forth in Western. And there's a standalone class that's always a favorite, herbal animal care is coming up in June. So that class, I do encourage it in person because we'll bring our puppy in and torture him endlessly. But for any of you who are pet lovers or owners, or if you're already an herbalist and want to branch out from 2-legged to 4-legged, or scales and so forth, we cover a wide range of critters that we can. Although we focus on dogs and cats, we talk about everything from birds to horses to bearded dragons. Go figure. Nothing like taking care of dragons. Do we have any other cool classes coming up? May this is this class. Oh, and then Trish, who checked you in, and a lot of you have corresponded with, she's doing a once a month, I believe. Yeah. For those of you who are exploring herbalism on your own, or however, or with us, most of us haven't taken a lot of science classes, anatomy and physiology, pathology kind of stuff, probably since high school, if you were lucky. So she's breaking it up by body system as she goes forward, and doing a 2-hour class on a Thursday night. So far that's been really well received online and in person, and nice handouts and stuff. And I would say, I don't care how long I do this, and I teach anatomy, physiology, pathology. She does a really nice job and has lots of cool letters after her name that makes it so she knows what she's talking about. All right, enough of that stuff. It's always interesting. This class, sometimes it's well attended, sometimes it's not. A lot of people are moving to Florida, and nobody knows how to grow anything down here. So I'm just going to assume that, for most of you, your transplants to Florida, and you were gardener up north, and you're like, now I want to grow stuff here. And even if you've tried, you've killed everything, because up north we plant in the spring and we harvest in the fall, and it gets covered with snow the rest of the year. And that is the exact opposite of what we do here. And so we'll do our best to figure out what to do with our sand that we call soil, and look at some specific herbs, and a lot of them are in the handouts, but I'm happy to cover other cool plants and so forth as people are trying to explore some. And it's really fun. So this building, we got here a year, and maybe a little over a year and a half. I don't really remember. I'm bad with time. And this was an old daycare center, and it was flat out back, and nothing but Spanish needle, Biden's alba. There wasn't, there was a couple of oak trees that were sad. And we're actually on a half-acre land. So we go from Central to First. How I lucked out to find a half-acre in the Central Avenue, I don't know, but the herb gods were smiling on us. So I think we brought in about 100 yards of mulch and 100 yards of soil, and a lot of volunteers, and we appreciated that. And we created a mound out there that was our fire pit. And basically, and we'll talk a little bit about what soil lasagna is, but we did our poor man's version of soil lasagna out there. And everything that you see planted was planted slightly less than a year ago. And none of
Yep.
it was large. Most of it was little things, little 4-inch pots. And so now we have trees that are over my head. The moringa is well over my head, and a bunch of obscure stuff. With everything you see back there, I won't say it's all edible, but it's all medicinal. So some medicinals are poisonous, but we use them topically, or we do really low doses with them. So it was, admittedly, I had a lot of help out there, and we did use a little bulldozer occasionally. I cheated. Boy, I'll tell you what, that bobcat was handy.
It was fun.
Yeah, no. And I'll tell you a little, I have an odd upbringing. I was born in Chicago, and I was probably 4 years old when I started playing in the dirt, trying to grow a garden. Moved to New York City, and I think I was 8. We were on 77th in New York. It kind of, our back alley went across, was a Riverside Drive, I think. We dead ended in that, and then you threw a rock from there, and you threw it into the East River. And everybody, that was kind of the service interest, was along 76th Street. And we would skateboard there when nobody knew what a skateboard was. I know it's old hat now. And that's where everybody took their dogs. And so there's dog poop everywhere, and it was dirty. New York City was generally dirty in the early 70s, or that was late 60s. And so a couple of my friends got together, and we created the 76th Street Beautification Project, and went out and started buying flowers and planting and sweeping up all the sidewalks around there. And so I haven't stopped. I spent a winter in Long Island, in New York, in Flanders, and had a small garden there, grew all the usual northern stuff. After that, we moved down in the Bahamas, which was kind of what a lot of you are doing, to discover, like, how do you grow here in Florida? The soil was equally as crappy down there, maybe not quite as bad, but darn near. And basically, over time and experimentation, I'll spare you all the other stories, but now our house down the south side of St. Pete, we've got a half acre there, with about 150 different medicinal plants that we grow, a lot of edible stuff, and have spent at least the last 10 years kind of developing the soil and so forth. And I will say, over the years, I've gone from a little fanatical of like, no, plants must live in the ground, I shall not grow in pots, to get over yourself. Raised beds and pots really allow you to expand what you can grow, and it's a heck of a lot easier to control things like soil, pH, and so forth, sunlight, and all of that. So I've gotten over myself, and it's one of the challenges then, of course, is what can we grow? How do we prepare our soil? What kind of sunlight do plants really like in Florida? And pH and so forth, all of that certainly comes into play, but it becomes challenging. And it literally, for those of us who grow here in Pinellas, or live in Pinellas County, our soil pH and our soil composition is completely different from Hillsborough and Pasco and so forth. And so if you go, oh, I grow all this cool stuff, I've got burdock and blah, 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 and I'm growing all that, and you're literally in South Tampa, it is challenging at best to grow it here. And so there is a big learning curve of whose advice do we take? Take your next door neighbor's advice, because they probably have pretty close to the same soil as you. So, and I will say, please shout out questions as you go, because like I have my kind of what I'm planning on covering, but ultimately I know everybody came to the class because I got that one question. You can wait till the end too. So, although you can grow in summer here, I'll start with seasons, and we'll work our way up to soil. We started planting in June out here. Super stupid, like wrong time to plant. It's freaking hot, and luckily we had lots of volunteers. Most of those plants would have preferred we didn't do that. we had to expend a little extra water because we had to water everything in really well until those summer storms started to roll through to water for us every day. We had to water it ourselves. So this is not the preferred time to water right now. In case you hadn't noticed, it hasn't rained in about 2 weeks. If it has, it missed it. So most of your lawns are half dead. I just assume we're in a drought. I haven't bothered to check. So it's, you're doing a lot of watering that costs money. It costs the aquifer and so forth. If you've got a well, you're still pulling it out of the aquifer. Just doesn't cost you any money. So this is a hard time to plant until around July when we start getting that regular afternoon rains. That said, you can certainly plant now. Just got to put a little bit more work into it. It's okay. There's certain plants, and it's funny, this is medicinal plants. Well, guess what? Okra is medicinal. I actually prescribe okra to people. And we just don't think about it because we go buy it at the grocery store or it's gross and slimy. And so a lot of those things that are culinary herbs or foods are also medicinal. And so like, it's so funny. What do you grow in the summer? Okra. Nobody knows anything else, and I don't either. So there are definitely things like sweet potatoes and okra and so forth that we can grow. Our growing season really starts around September, October, where we get a little bit more free reign of what we can plant, and whether you're planting annuals or perennials is important. So perennials, like whatever, you just got to water the suckers in. Annuals gets a little bit more precise about when we plant usually. Nope. So September, October is usually when we start planting our annuals, our vegetables, our annual herbs, and even our perennials. It's kinder, we still get some of our rain. The days are shorter, the heat is starting to come off, our evenings are cooler. Usually December, January is when we're going to get our frosts, if we get them. South St. Pete, I don't know when I've last had I've been in my house for over 10 years. I've had a little wind burn on the exterior, but I've not had a hard freeze, and I don't even think I've had an actual freeze. It's just gotten cold. So again, where you are, like I'll plant any old time. The hardest part about December and January is the short days. So a number of plants need a lot of sunlight, enough hours in the day in order to grow. So your annuals, you might get away with some of them if you plant them in full sun in that winter time. And your perennials are just going to be dormant. So there are, and we'll talk about a couple of, and I'm going to argue with myself about some of this.
Hey,
Yep.
Bob,
You.
will you address for everybody, because you said we plant at that time, will you address if you're going from seed,
Yes.
would you start a little earlier?
So yes, thank you. That's a good question. So seeds you can grow, you can start seeds indoor or on a porch pretty much anytime you want, just protecting them from frost. Some people use grow lights. Light becomes less of an issue for seeds. So as long as they have a nice indirect light, they're fine. And, we can get them their first few set of permanent leaves before we transplant them. So you could do seeds in December, January easily, and then start looking at your February, March for your planting. So,
and then one more thing that goes with that,
yeah,
because I saw somebody display this dismay this week of this. If we are in our county, and I'm not sure if it's
and I am talking Pinellas County primarily, but
yeah, if we're doing that, let everybody know no extra fertilizer can be bought for any reason until we're through the rainy season. So if you are starting with seed, we'll need to be able to give them some ideas for like nettles or comfrey or something for extra emulsion.
Yeah.
So that
we're going to get to that. That's kind of, we'll cover
just
that.
making sure. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
So, and usually if we're planting in that February, March timeframe, we're harvesting right around now. Like we've got watermelons out there. We just harvested a bunch of squash and all kinds of good stuff out there that we're harvesting right about now. So one of the challenges also is, what do we grow? If we're talking medicine or food, most of us are familiar, and it's funny, we live in the South, in case you didn't know it. And most of the stuff that we buy in the grocery store is foods that people normally consume up north. And although there are plenty of exceptions, we can grow peppers down here, we can grow tomatoes and so forth. But the reality is, asparagus, you could do it, but it's not easy. But don't we just love asparagus this time of year? Well, that all grows up north, way up north. And so we have, like, I think this peninsula, it depends which map you read. The Department of Agriculture has really good maps. They have planting month by month, what you can grow and so forth based on your zone. So what they do is they break up the map based on zones. And so they look at some basic temperature gradients and what they have. I don't think they've been updated for about 30 years. I'm just guessing. I don't know. I haven't seen the date on it, but I'm here to tell you that global warming exists and it has changed the temperature gradients here in Florida in particular. And I'm technically, according to the map, 9B, 10A, just depends who you ask. I think I'm closer to 10B, 11A-ish where I am. I've not had a frost. And so that's more actual, not subtropical, but tropical kind of things. And we can assume that temperatures will continue to rise just a smidge over the next so many years. So if we're continuing to try to grow the things that are from the Northeast, you're going to have a harder and harder time. And whether that's food or herbs doesn't matter. So we should start, Bob opinion here, I think we should start looking to our tropics. We should look at the equatorial countries. We should be looking at South America, Southern Europe, North Africa. We should be exploring those. And we are seeing that's like moringa doesn't come from Florida. You know, and so we have a number of people who are starting to look outside of that. We should be looking at what do they grow in the Caribbean? And starting to propagate those things, and we're going to be more and more successful with those. And so the problem is, when we're talking herbs in particular, nobody knows what to do with those herbs. I do, at least the tropics. So, and I would say we're pretty well versed in South American herbs, not too far south. You know, once you Argentina, I don't know anything. So when we start to look at the more tropical aspects, you know, there's a lot of crossover into Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean nations, and they have a long history of obviously growing many different plants and herbal medicine that we can fairly easily grow here. You know, the only scary is you go, I hate to say it, I've found that Clearwater is the demarcation line. If there's a frost coming here, like, oh, I wonder if it's like not stopping at Clearwater, it never makes it down here. Unless it's calling for frosts in Miami, I don't sweat it. It just doesn't happen here. So if you're inland, ignore what I just said. If you're north of Clearwater, probably can't do it unless it's in a pot. But for those of you who are on the coast, for those of you who are in Pinellas County or this end of southern Pinellas County and further south, it's a no-brainer that we can really start to incorporate these tropical plants and the Caribbean plants to great success. I would say a third of what we have out there in the garden is either African, South Central America, and the Caribbean. That I don't have to do anything to it. Like, that's where it belongs. And we have everything from baobab trees out there to all kinds of strongback and a bunch of things nobody ever heard of. I'll spare y'all. So it's super interesting to start to think outside of the Northeast. You know, and I say Northeast, the Midwest grows the same thing as the Northeast and so forth, but we need to start to explore those. That said, you can grow plants from, I've had success with Siberian ginseng here in Florida. Guess what? It doesn't belong in Florida, it belongs in Siberia. And so we're talking herbs. So we can push zones. Just because something says it grows in a particular zone, it's native to that zone, doesn't mean you can't push it down here. And one of the ways, I kill a lot of plants. I apologize. Because how else are we going to learn how to grow that particular plant and explore those different aspects of, and I grow these plants not to make millions of dollars off. I grow them to know them. My sole purpose in life is to understand herbs better. And if I just read it in a book, I'm not going to really know it. To actually grow it from a seed or a cutting and watch it go through its life cycle, we start to understand plants in a very different manner. We start to understand their names and actions of different plant parts, not always just the part that is sold. All of the plants are used. So there's a lot of different reasons to try to grow something like Siberian ginseng. One of the ways I try to experiment with some of those plants that are not normal in Florida is to those that grow in a harsh environment. Guess what? Florida's a harsh environment. Siberian ginseng, for instance, grows out of the cracks of rocks on cliffs overhanging and full sun beating down and drought tundra kind of stuff. Florida, but cold. And so I was like, you know what? It can hang, and it gets hot, in the Arctic Circle there too. And they just have permafrost to protect it. I was like, let's see if it can handle it, because if it can handle that, it can handle anything. And as it turned out, it did okay. I had to make sure I never watered it and things like that. But other than that, it did fine. And so those things that have these very tight parameters, like it has to have this exact soil, it has to have like no sunlight, those get harder, and you're going to have less success, or you have to be really darn good at your botany and start to play with pH a little bit more. And I'll give you a good example. I was able to get true kava shipped to me, like I'd say overnight, but it was more like 4-day. But they had pulled it fresh out of the ground, had roots and all of it. And I got like 15 plants shipped to me. And I was like, I'll figure it out. Like, I had no idea how to grow it, but it grows on volcanic islands. It grows in Hawaii, in the South Pacific. And I tried everything I could to grow. And this was the Piper methysticum, the true kava. And what I figured out, it really needs volcanic rock, which is very mineral rich. And so I kept it going for 2 or 3 years, I think, but ultimately I didn't do a good job with it. And I am a lazy gardener. Like, I hate to say it, it's pretty out there right now. I didn't water or mow or weed for the last 3 weeks at least, maybe longer. And so I ran out there today and made it pretty. And so, like, I hate to say it, everything out there is pretty hardy because it was still alive. If I was trying to grow something that I was limping along, I neglect plants occasionally, and so they're not going to make it. And so depending on like, I am a master gardener, I'm the master of masters, and I will sit there and meticulously get my tweezers. Go for it. You can grow anything. You don't need me. This is too basic. For those of you who have a job, other than plants, we need things that are a little bit easier to grow or propagate and so forth. So I want to encourage you all, don't be afraid of just because it has a zone, but recognize where it's indigenous to may dictate your success or not. One I've tried to grow with 0 success is maca. Guess where maca grows? In the Andes Mountains, and usually above, I forget whether it's 5,000 or 9,000 feet. I got it to grow that big and then it died. It doesn't belong in Florida by any stretch of the imagination. And so if you're in Colorado, go for it. Maybe some of you online are. Oh wait, Babsy's here. You might be able to grow it. So let's talk soil a little bit. I'm going to pay attention. Oh my God. How did that much time go by? So our sandy soil here is not our friend. Unless you're growing sand spurs and Spanish needle and Ceta cordifolia, you need to amend your soil. And so, yes, there are certainly native plants. But unfortunately, we have altered the terrain of Florida as we cut down trees and do buildings and parking lots. We lost our topsoil. There, for however long before we got here, there was topsoil from the thousands of years of trees breaking down and blah, blah, blah. And it all washes away. And so we need to recreate what used to be there. And the native people did the same thing. They tended the soil. If they set up a village of some sort, they're going to tend the soil. If they're a nomadic group, then they find whatever's there. So we still can find remnants of how they help to do that. We even have a lot of indigenous people in the Caribbean, Central and South America still use some old techniques of semi-nomadic groups where they would burn the plot to plant their stuff. And now we have this cool thing called biochar, and there's all this millions of videos, and that's really awesome. What people used to do is just clear the land and burn the lumber there, and that would help to nourish the soil. And so yes, make biochar, whatever. Most of us, again, don't have time for that. And so you can use anything. Well, a couple of things that we need. We need compost. We need mulch. That's the starting point. I'm a fan of seaweed. And so literally going down to boat ramps or the beach or whatever and rake up a pile of seaweed, or get a friend to do it. Thanks, friends. And using that to amend your soil, breaks down nicely, retains water, and is mineral rich. So it is providing a variety of trace minerals. I think it's one of the reasons why this does so well out here. There are a number. It's funny, when I was a little kid, I remember the weird stories that I think they told us in school. I don't even remember where I got it. Where when the native people did that Holy Trinity, they were planting the corn and the beans and all of that. I learned that they would dig a hole and drop a fish in it. I don't know whether that was true. I don't even know if they still do that. But
Bob, can I
yes,
say
please.
something about this whenever you have a chance?
No, go for it.
So I didn't announce myself. I'm the other half of Bob in the school, but what's unique about me is that both my family on both sides are farm families, and the one's been here since the late 1600s and the other one since the early 18s. And so I have a lot of experience about, like, if the food didn't grow, then we didn't have the food we needed to have. We'd have to go forage. And so it's important to know that, like what Bob's saying, exactly 100%, like the fish that are running at the time, certain things are growing. So he just said something that was important. But down here, the bluefish are running when the corn's supposed to be growing. And the bluefish are very, very, very full of, very oily and very bloody. So that it's more than just throwing a fish in the hole. Like, he's totally right. And one of the things that we would use or save, obviously our compost, but we would use cow manure, chicken manure, and that's really popular around here, as well as other plants, so that we could make a mash that was with nettles or a mash that was with comfrey, and save it and let it get gross and fishy and then dump that. But for a large space, that wouldn't do. So one of the easiest things, like Bob said, the grass, absolutely. But another thing that's free to us right now is mushroom compost, so that it will be sterilized and inoculized, and it would just be a button mushroom and Bella, and it's the Monterey company. It's halfway in the middle of the state, but if you drove your pickup truck up there, they'll dump the dump truck load in it.
And Renee, I'm not sure if you're moving, but you're breaking up a little bit. But what you said was the Monterey Mushroom Company.
Yeah, and I'll
near
stop
Orlando.
talking. It's our connection here is God. So okay, so my point is, the stuff that's growing and like the fish that's growing at the time you're planting, that actually goes with your plants, is my point. If you're outside fishing and going, and if there's lots of seaweed, it's the right time to put that on those plants at that time, was my point.
So couple things and like you can go and buy bone meal and blood meal, so you can go and get it in organic or whatever. And so for those of you who aren't going to go out and catch a bunch of fish and throw them into your garden, that is the equivalent. You can buy fish meal and all kinds of other interesting things. If you are weird enough to go out and get some dead fish, you know, like, and I hate to say it, good chance we have a red tide this summer. And I sorry if I'm jinxing it, but like, it wouldn't surprise me. There's a fish kill. They're not poison. They've had an exposure to a particular bacteria, cyanobacteria. So if you go down there every morning and collect a bunch of dead fish, those are just going into the city dump, unfortunately. So that would be a good utilization of it. Here's the one thing I've learned the hard way: bury it deep. Because otherwise you're going to have some stinky ass fish, because the raccoons and the cats and the dog will all catch it and roll in it and so forth. You know, if you're just dropping it in 6 inches into a hole, you're going to find it again. So make sure you go deep. Yes.
So the bacteria doesn't affect the soil
No.
at all?
Kills the fish and irritates the crap out of us, but that'll just break down and compost just like anything else. And oops, oh, people.
Yeah, along those lines, when you talked about seaweed.
Yeah.
You know, it can be pretty salty, I guess.
Yes.
Out there. Is that a problem?
So she asked you know, is there a problem with the seaweed because it is covered with salt? Oddly enough, no. So if you took rock salt and threw it in your garden, you'd probably kill something. And there's not a lot of salt per se, but there's 99 different trace minerals, NaCl being one of them. And so as you water, it actually breaks down and doesn't seem to adversely affect them. And rinsing it off would defeat the whole purpose. So I will say I was terrified the first 10 times I used seaweed, and every time I'm like, those plants do better. They grow faster.
That doesn't do well with,
I've not, I'm sure there's something, but I've not seen it yet. It's funny. There's a number of different, too much is too much. So it's a dressing. And so you can eat, you know, you can get fancy and chop it up and mix it all in with your soil and so forth. But literally, we usually just do a light dressing around the plants. You can put a little bit in, like if you're digging a larger hole for a bush or a tree or something, you could actually put a little in the hole. But as you water it in, it gets so diluted to really just add really diverse nutrients into the soil. So it's great. And of course, the seaweed starts to break down and compost in there.
Our soil is so porous that it washes away the nutrients dramatically. And so that's one of the reasons why. Like, you need the extra minerals in there. So it works out.
So I want to talk about poop for a second. You know, yes, some people do poop into their yard in their own garden. You go for it. I'll skip that. But one of the problems, so Renee has said, like, cow manure and horse manure, goat poop and rabbit poop, everybody's poop, right? And so all of it is wonderful, except most farms where you would be scooping up the poop use some sort of dewormer on their critters. So if they're doing that and you take fresh poop and put it in your garden, it will kill all the good stuff in your garden, especially the worms. We love worms. We pay extra for worms, right? Worm castings and things like that are like this magic food for your. So if you kill all your worms, you got the problem. The other part is a lot of animal poop is too rich, and so it needs to compost some. So don't just go and scoop up all the horse poop and you know, throw it on top of your garden. You're very likely to kill it. So create a poop compost.
When you have a chance, we have a question, and it kind of goes with what you're saying. So it's just about the credibility of eating food that's grown with red tide kill. So I want to address what you just said in that. Anything you want about that as well, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So if you properly compost something, if you covered it up with something that was dark, if you created a certain heat inside of it, that the heat gets to a certain temperature so that it neutralizes all kinds of things, and it would, so like anything that was a bacteria issue nematodes, extra things in there that weren't supposed to be, it would come to a neutralizing. Like, there's a whole science that is not for a beginner's class around properly compost items. So when I say to you, put rabbit poop, put chicken poop, put cow manure, it's processed items that have been properly heated to the right temperature for the right amount of time, broke down, and then we throw it on. Like, if you go to get it from somebody who has it for composting, they allow for that to happen before they would
Yes.
give it to you or
Yeah.
sell it to you. If you get it for yourself, you put it into a pile, cover it, and let it sit. So there's ways around that. So when we're talking about us dumping red tide things onto our soil, you don't plant on top of that immediately. That's preparing your soil for planting. By the time we get to planting, like if you did that all summer when it's difficult to grow, when you're ready to plant in the fall, it would have sat under that internal heat and killed off anything that.
And it can be a lot of it, you know, it's always interesting. There is when you buy fish emulsion to put on there, that's coming usually from the most toxic ponds you can imagine. And it really grows great stuff. And I saw somebody had written like, no, don't eat red tide fish. That sucker's, that'll probably kill you. And not the red tide itself. It's just an overgrowth of a plankton that's already out there, diaphlaginate. It's just too much is too much. And whether we got green slime out there or anything else, most of your algae, most of your seaweeds, any of those are really helpful. And it's all about getting it to break down so that the nutrients are released. So poop needs to rest. It needs to compost and start to break down. If you get just a pile of poop and you throw a seed in it, it ain't growing. And even after it's broken down, too much is always too much. So if you use too much compost, it's too rich. It will actually hurt your plant. Too much poop will hurt your plants. Too much mulch will hurt your plants. So it's always about a mix and a balance. And there's one thing we haven't talked about. It's funny, and sorry, I'm sneaking in people health stuff on all of this, whether you like it or not. We talk about good bacteria in the body, probiotics, right? You take an antibiotic in order to prevent the yeast infections and the diarrhea and all that. You take a probiotic, or if you've done a lot, you should just take those forever. And so there is soil bacteria. And most of them live in the first few inches of the soil. And they help to break down leaves. They help to break down your compost. And that actually, we find is just like in our gut, is a symbiotic relationship with the plants. And so here's all these plants and those roots are like almost touching. And then there's a bunch of soil bacteria that actually allow for the absorption, the breakdown and the absorption of nutrients and the communication between the plants. And so it's funny, we had somebody who helped us, permaculture guy who wanted to use our garden here as a project. And so he came up with the idea. He was a big soil bacteria guy. He was like, all right, you got all these weeds down here, they're kind of in the way, but we don't want to just pile on top of this 100 yards of mulch. He was like, let's scrape off the top 4 inches and push it to the side. Then do all of our stuff and bring that back and put it on top. And that will actually help to preserve those soil bacteria. So one of the things, and I've done this for years, I'll buy, you know, a truckload of fancy river mud, or not pond mud from some forest up north. And but it's so rich, it doesn't work. And then I get, you know, we get like 20, 30 yards of mulch dropped in our driveway on a regular basis, and I'll spread around. And so all of that starts to break down, and I'll mix those together. And then I'll get an equal amount of my sand that is my yard as well. And I mix it all together, because that top sand, and I take it around the top, because that's where all the good stuff is. And so it's about creating this mix of really rich stuff, really good compost, all of these other components, but it has to have some of our native soil and those native bacteria. And I think that's one of the things people skip sometimes. They create, you know, they there's peat moss and there's vermiculite and all this other stuff, and they bring all this cool stuff together. And the reality is it doesn't quite cut the mustard if you don't put some of our dirt in there. And just in the same way that we need to keep our internal garden healthy by making sure that those good bacteria in there, because guess what? It helps us break down our food and assimilate our nutrients. Same thing. It's no different. And I'll spill you.
When you're taking the pH balance on, you're mixing those,
You actually check your pH balance?
well, I'm at a couple times already.
Yes, I know.
You know. So, I'm wondering, you know, how do you know what you need to add as you're doing this?
That I honestly, most plants have a range. Is a general rule, they like it a little acidic, but there's a few that like it a little bit more basic. I don't believe I've ever tested my soil pH.
Okay.
I have a test thing. It's in the drawer right by the kitchen. I don't think I've taken it out of the box yet. And so you can, the Pinellas County Extension Services will actually test your soil and look at what nutrient some of the services are free, some are less free. But they'll actually do that for you. They're really good about it, because I don't think anybody utilizes their service. So probably somebody who wants to actually, you know, have them have a purpose, they probably get pretty excited.
Is that at the college?
The only one I know is up near Largo, off of Walsingham. I'm sure there's other ones,
We
but
have to have you send it to the University of Florida.
oh, is that where they end up
Yeah,
sending it? Is UF?
thought
So yeah, that makes sense. And UF has, University of Florida has volumes of information on their website as well, about all kinds of cool plants and where they grow. I won't say it's up to date, but it is cool. I use that as a source for information. So yes, you should get your soil tested and get it perfectly balanced. I honestly don't. I work more on diversity in my soil, and work on its porousness for the type of plant that I'm looking for. So think cactus, aloe. That's really about it. That doesn't want to be in standing water. So we need to add enough rocks, and really sand works pretty well for them. And you can use things like perlite, which are those things that look like styrofoam but are not styrofoam. Make sure it's not styrofoam, because they do sell crappy styrofoam too. We don't need more styrofoam in our environment. And that's actually really good for making sure your soil stays well drained. Where the vermiculite, I forget what vermiculite actually is, but that actually absorbs it. And you can also use peat moss. And so for things that want wetter feet, you use things, and you can use coconut fiber. There's a bunch of different things, and those will actually make your soil more acidic. The peat moss and the coconut fiber. So those, if I'm like, oh, I need to make it more acidic, I get more peat moss and throw it in there. But other than that, I don't overthink it.
How will you know beside a dime that you've done it? I mean, you know that it's on its way to. How would you know if it's too acidic? Like, what is the plant presenting?
So one of the things, especially when if we're growing Spanish needle Bidens, you could probably grow that in the air, right? And so we don't do a lot of research on the growing conditions of something that's native and grows well on the coast here, and out of the cracks of sidewalks. We don't think about it. But if see if I can find something lavender. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my list here. Lavender doesn't grow here. And so every plant is going to have very specific needs or preferences. And so you got to just research it. Google is handy for that. And that, for lack of a better thing, if it gives it says prefers acidic or likes alkaline soil, then prefers is not a strong statement. Like, I prefer, blueberries to strawberries, but I'll eat whatever you put in front of me, right? And there's other things. Actually, blueberries are a good example. You really need acidic soil. They ain't gonna make it without acidic soil. And I've killed many a blueberry till I figured that out.
Bob, I'm raising my hand if it's possible.
Yes, go for it.
If you lose my connection, just tell me and I'll stop talking. Um,
Talk a
Desiree,
little lighter, louder.
Desiree, if the leaves yellow or the plant droops,
Uh-huh.
it's not enough food, not enough nitrogen, or too much water. If the leaves brown around the edges or look like they're burnt, it's too much sun or too much acid in the soil.
Gotcha.
So
Thank you.
too much food, too much nitrogen.
Gotcha.
So when I'm researching, I really look for extremes. So if it says must have pH above whatever, make up a number, or must have alkali soil, must have volcanic, then you better do your homework and work a little harder. If it just says preferred, whatever. Don't work that hard at it. And there's a lot of lies out there too, because there's plants that when you buy them at Home Depot, don't buy your plants at Home Depot and Lowe's, but we've all done that. I know. Don't lie. It will say full sun. They're lying. It's full sun in Maine, not here. And so we have to use a little bit more discerning when we look at that. The only thing that likes full sun is cactus. and after that, maybe aloe. And so most things would like a little less than full sun. And a lot of things that when it says part sun to full sun, probably once half and half in Florida, or morning sun. But the summertime here destroys things, us included. And so it's really important that we kind of look at that discerning eye. And sometimes the tell, because, well, that's what the label says. How am I supposed to know? There's some tricks to it. And one of them is think about what cactus and aloe looks like, right? Because like everybody's like, no, I can go. It's literally growing in the parking lot in the back of the office, right? At the clinic, we got we got staff parking. Y'all don't go back there. There's a couple spots back there, and I literally in front of the backstop there for the parking spaces, I have aloe growing. In case I have somebody comes in and needs some aloe, I'll cut off a leaf. It's right there, and it's never been watered. It has nothing but sand and exhaust fumes, and yet it's thriving. I freaked somebody out at Herb Day. Lemongrass is another one. And it's literally between us and the mustard seed, which is next door to us at the clinic. I have a wall of lemongrass growing out of the concrete. And I've never watered it, full sun. So think about what the leaves of a few of those full sun, drought tolerant, grows out of the cracks of rocks. They tend to have leathery, hard leaves. They're oftentimes spiny. So literally the thorns on a cactus are leaves. And so if we see hard, waxy, leathery things, they're likely, not a guarantee, they're likely to handle full sun better than delicate, soft things, right? Think about ferns and mints. They're soft and they're fragrant and they're delicate. They fold over easily. If I go to grab the plant, it just snaps up. Those are not going to make it. So we really have to think about, what does the plant look like? So if we're like, okay, the label's obviously a lie, I killed 6 of those already, then we start to think about, what is it? What does its leaves tell us about that? And that can take you a long way. I screwed up a lot of plants, and I tend to, especially when I'm experimenting, I buy 3. One goes in the sun, one goes half and half, one goes in the shade. Let's see who makes it. And that's a little mean. I hate killing plants. I get really frustrated when what I do doesn't work, and I'll use some judgment with that. I can even experiment sometimes with soil composition if I can't find the research or I just don't have time, which is sad. So, there's definitely a lot of experimenting that is super appropriate. You know, it's great when we have a staff of gardeners to teach us everything and take care of it. But like, most of us are growing out of our house or our back porch out of a couple pots or a raised bed. I said raised bed. Let's talk about raised bed. Raised beds for the beginning gardener, and there's versions of raised beds, is probably the easiest way to garden. It's and there's kind of two versions of raised beds. One is literally build a structure, and some of you might have seen that little concrete structure we had out in front. That's a fancy raised bed, right? And we got a bunch of those scattered around. You can do that with a bunch of boards. I've seen people do it with cinder blocks. I'm not a fan of cinder blocks, but I actually have some cinder blocks back there I did it with. You can also just go, I'm just going to pile the soil up and call it a day. Like that's a type of raised bed. Some of the problems are soil, like we have lots of bugs in Florida, or you, in case y'all didn't notice, we got, roaches that will rip your face off and things like that. And so we have lots of flying things. Well, we've got lots of crawling things, and we have lots of digging things. And so nematodes are, I would say that nematodes and cutworms are my least favorite critters in the world. And nematodes and cutworms will come and kill your plants with gusto. How many of y'all have killed tomato plants here? Don't lie. Like you planted it and 3 days later it fell over dead. Anybody ever have that? You got visited by cutworm. So I learned a long time ago, before you plant it, actually wrap a little newspaper around the stem where it actually just below where it meets the soil and just above, and that sometimes protects it from the cutworms. Also, the nematodes are these little tiny little critters that come and suck the juice out of your roots. And so I plant this plant and you did all the right stuff. You did this beautiful soil and you pull it up and there's all these weird warty looking things all over the roots. You got visited by nematodes. So there's poison. I'm not a fan of poison. We got enough poisons being tossed into our soil and into our aquifer. You can try to cover it and smother them. Sometimes that works, usually not. Or you use raised beds. And so the raised beds are pretty good. Like I have nematodes everywhere I want to plant. So usually what you do is some people use newspaper, some people use cardboard. I've not used carpeting. That seems a little creepy and synthetic. But I know people do that, whatever. So you put down a layer of something to basically press the grass down and smother it, ideally. Usually 2 or 3 feet wide, wider, better. It's easier to work with. And then you start to layer in your soil. So we're looking at soil, which can be our sand, or it can be, you can buy some fancy pre-mixed dirt from any one of the nurseries and so forth. Then you're layering in compost, poop, dried leaves, and so forth until you get it like a foot or so off the ground, and it just kind of depends what you have options of. But putting multiple layers of that in is really the trick to it. And then you plant right into that. So that can be literally on the ground. And you may have to periodically add more compost to it or more soil, and that's fine. If you do it too narrow, then it just erodes away. So like I'd say 2 feet's the minimum. I think 3 feet's a little bit better. And then you plant in the center. And it works like a champ, and it protects you from nematodes. If you do a raised bed, it's really helpful. You still want to do lasagna, right? Lots of layers of stuff, but really helpful to throw a lot of twigs and leaves. If you do a raised bed, still put down your cardboard, because otherwise you're just going to get some really long grass growing out of the center of your stuff. So put down protective layer. Throw in a bunch of twigs or logs, and there's the Hugel culture is an idea. They put logs down there. I find it doesn't work as well. I kind of limit it to the size of my wrist and a bunch of twigs. that actually starts to break down and it absorbs water. So you kind of got this reservoir of moisture in, you travel, whatever. And so it kind of keeps it down. Fill it all the way to the top, because you put all this organic matter in. Over the next year, it will break down and it will settle down. Otherwise, especially like we've got a raised bed on the side there where I have, spice bush. There we go. Spice bush, which is a ceremonial medicinal plant, Western and Chinese and Cherokee. And that whole thing's dropped 6 inches since I planted it a little over a year ago. And I'm like, well, crap, that's a perennial. How do I add more soil in? And so it's fine if I would just planted a bunch of carrots and tomatoes and I could just do it every season. But the reality is I've got a perennial in there and I need to add another 4 inches of soil. At some point, I will be in trouble. So I haven't figured that one out yet. Raised beds are fairly new to me. I've only been, I guess I've done it for 8-10 years now.
When would you transplant? When can you transplant that though?
When can I transplant it? Anytime I feel like it.
Okay.
I don't feel like it.
Okay.
I'm saying pots, the garden pots.
Yes.
I had read that aluminum cans are okay to put in the base of that, like instead of rocks. That okay?
So large pots, and that was where I was going next, was so large pots, yes. I don't like aluminum. There's all the aluminum in our everything in our pots, and I don't know. And aluminum does occur in trace amounts naturally. That's where we get aluminum from ultimately. I guess they don't break down. So that's benefit. I prefer clay for creating a reservoir. The clay absorbs some water. They have longevity and oh crap, I broke it. Then you use that for rocks in the bottom of your pot for the next one. So I definitely prefer clay. I hate to say it, I do use plastic to propagate with, and I wish I didn't. I go broke if I bought clay pots for everything. So I couldn't give you a good reason other than it's creepy. I will say aluminum in the sun, it's really hot.
No, they were saying to put the cans of aluminum, like empty aluminum.
Oh, well, empty
It's
aluminum
hot.
cans inside.
Pot
Oh, that's funny.
to fill it up.
Yeah. So
Oh, I guess you could.
Yeah,
You could. Rocks probably, if like I just want it, like especially for a pot, I would use rocks. Just they provide some trace minerals in a growing. Do you ever notice like rocks and trees have lichen on there? And so lichen actually produce acid and break stuff down, and why we have soil on the planet. And so, yeah, I like it would take up space, but I don't think it has a secondary benefit where I think a rock would. So I would try to, you could get seashells and do that as well. We'll talk about seashells here in a minute too. So yeah,
Those aluminum cans, like cans that like beans and stuff come in, are coated on the inside,
yeah,
and that coating
that's what you.
can leave like plastic. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
My
you would definitely
connection
have to
is very-
rinse them. Yeah,
My
you would definitely have to
connection is
rinse them.
very, very poor. No, I mean
And
it's actually permanently coated.
yes, yeah, they do put weird silicone coatings and stuff like that. So yeah, I would. There's so many better options. I'd even do a cinder block before I did that, and I don't like cinder blocks. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true. It would provide a lightweight to do that. Go with
Like, how you have that straw containers, like, things like that.
yeah, straw would work. And yeah, that's actually something else you can use in lasagna. You can actually buy bales of hay. And so you could use that to layer the bottom or to make layers in your lasagna. And a lot of people, when they do plantings, if they're doing seeds or seedlings directly into the ground, which is an option, they'll just put a light sprinkling of hay to provide a little, it breaks down, B, it does provide a little bit of shade, up a little bit, so you get that dappled light through there. I've seen that backfire. it's not supposed to have a bunch of seeds in there, but sometimes you start growing hay. And so I've gotten some, I think twice I've like gotten way too many hay seeds in there, and I was weeding forever, and that was a little irritating. I do like hay in the lasagna though. That does actually really well and super inexpensive. And sorry, I'm going to pick on you because I think that's kombucha you're about to drink.
It is.
And so the leftovers from kombucha or fermentation makes great compost and great lasagna layers. So if you have connections on people who are doing that, hit them up. They're just throwing the trash. Like,
Many mothers.
yeah. So, like there's now at least 2 fermenting companies here in St. Pete. All, there's a coffee shop. You think we were Seattle. There's a coffee shop on every corner. Coffee grounds do well in compost. Too much is too much. So a little bit goes a long way. So start thinking about how we're creating a waste stream from any number of these different products. The one thing, and I didn't say this, to keep meat out of your compost for a variety of reasons. Critters certainly leading the parade, but also it tends to stop the fermentation, the composting, and also gets really smelly. So stick with green things and brown things. How am I doing on time? I'm doing good on time. All right, we talked about pots. So I'm a huge fan of pots. I grow. It's funny, and it's probably a lot to do with the nematodes. I try to grow kratom, which is a tree, a tropical tree, and a number of other interesting tropical trees. And I killed every single kratom tree I put in the ground, without fail. Well, that's not true. I have one going. As soon as I put them into large pots, they went like gangbusters. I could control the soil composition because they're very heavy feeders. So it worked really well to put those in pots. And, it's hard to move a pot. You get a 100-gallon pot and fill it up with soil. You're not going to move that a lot. So you kind of need to figure out where you're going to put it. But that said, one of 2 things will happen in time. Either that tree will bust out of the bottom and start growing in the soil, which may be fine, unless there's a frost coming and you want to move your pot and you get a dolly or something, you can actually move it. Or it will break the pot. And so you have an option. It's horrifying to do this, but there is benefit and insert any old plant here, to literally knock your pot over, pull the tree out, knock the soil off its roots, trim back some of the roots, and give it fresh soil and put it back in the pot. I grit my teeth and just like, I don't know why I'm doing this, but it actually works and can be very beneficial. Don't be meaner than you need to. The biggest thing is to make sure that for those heavy feeders that you're giving it enough nutrients in the new soil and water it in very, very well. If you're cutting some of the bigger roots off, you do need to, they have stuff that you can put over, like if you cut a limb, you put like some sealant, it needs a Band-Aid. They have tree Band-Aids, and you would use that same stuff on the roots. And I hate to say it, you can get that at any gardening supply store or online, of course. With pots, the big thing to look for pots is drainage. You can also, for things that like wet feet, you can put a bottom on it, and so you just keep a small amount of water there. Or if it wants well-drained soil, you put rocks or perlite or something in the bottom. And so you can really control what happens in that pot a little bit better. If you're starting at the little 4-inch pots, you can just continue to go up into pot size until you're like, yeah, I can't let this anymore, I'm going to stop. But always watch for what we call root bound, where those roots have gotten so tight in there, it's now starving. And it's challenging sometimes. If you go to transplant something that's root bound, again, you have to do horrible things of like tear those roots, otherwise it will die. It will literally strangle itself and die. So I always watch my pots. I need a pot here. There's a pot. And so there's little drain holes in the bottom of most pots, right? Always turn it upside down and go, oh, look, there's some roots coming out. That's your tell. It's time, you don't have to rush, but if you see a couple little white roots starting to come out in the next month, you need to transplant that into a larger pot. And if you can, if you're at your local garden nursery and you go, and you pull it out and it's in the perfect shape of the pot, just put it back. It means it's really root bound. And so it can be really, really challenging to work with that. Let's talk about some plants. One of the things, and I'm going to say one more thing. When people are you bought a pot of something and you put it in the ground in particular, a lot of times people water it for the first day or two, and then they forget about it. So I, of course, have never done that. I would say good rule of thumb, try to water it in well every day for about 2 weeks, and then you can start spacing it out. And if it rained that day, you don't have to water. Yay. But right now you put something in the ground, you only water it in once, it ain't gonna make it unless it's a cactus. I never buy plants from grocery stores. I want to say every single plant I've ever bought from a grocery store died. And it's usually like, guess what? They might be good at groceries, they're not good at plants. Go to a plant person. And there are many in our community here. Certainly, I'm talking about all this exotic weird stuff like Siberian ginseng, grow native plants and grow native plants from your area, because witch hazel grows in the panhandle. It doesn't grow here. So you'll probably kill it. I'm trying to grow it. I'll find out. So it's Florida native doesn't mean it's going to do great. So we have to say Florida native, and then where in Florida. We're a big ass state. So that can, and I'm going to go back to Caribbean. We can do that pretty well from around here. Let's talk about some unique things for a couple of plants. And I just say that because they're common medicinal plants that people are more familiar with. And I'll do my best to talk about the plant itself. Lemongrass is phenomenal. It's easy to grow. It will self-seed. So it puts out this beautiful plume. If you haven't seen it, there's a nice one out the back door just to the right that it's got a beautiful plume on it. There's 2 ways to propagate it. One is by seed, where you take that plume and you rip it off of there. You just strip the seeds off and you go poof, and it'll grow everywhere in your yard. It's awesome. The other way is those are individual stalks. Like if you went to the grocery store and you say, I want to buy some lemongrass, they're going to give you this little woody stalk. So if you break those off and get a little bit of the roots, you can actually, like the one out there has probably got 50 little lemongrass stalks. I could break that whole thing apart, and every single one of those I could propagate faster than a seed. I had a lot of fun the very first time. I actually had a lawn back in the day, different house, and I was growing some lemongrass, and it went to seed, and they spread all over my land. So every time I mowed my yard, I had this beautiful scent of lemongrass that came up. So it is one of the few that full sun, crappy soil. It does better in full sun. It wants full sun. Like put it in the most dead part of your yard, and it's beautiful and it smells nice. And all parts of the plant, maybe not the seeds, I just don't know how to use those, but the leaves and the stalk can be used for both food and medicine. And if you're not familiar with it, it makes a lovely tea. It's just lemony goodness. Its Caribbean name is fever grass. Guess what it's for? So it is cooling in nature for those of you who are familiar with energetics. So it's really a nice tea in the summertime when it's freaking hot. It's also used for urinary tract infections. And one of my favorite teas, and no, iced tea is bad for you. Drink warm drinks. rosemary and lemongrass is a phenomenal combination. It's freakish combination, but rosemary is a lovely, lovely tea, and the combination of those two is phenomenal. So yarrow, this is more of a northern plant. It's really funny when Renee and I, like, we go up to conferences. We go to one up in Boston area. We go to one in North Carolina, especially when we're going up towards the Northeast there to Boston. We're like stopped at a stoplight going, oh my God. And there's like a field of yarrow growing. And we're like going to cause a car accident because we're going to go harvest all the mugwort and yarrow. But it is up north, it is a weed. Like, it's embarrassing that we grow things like that down here, but down here you can grow it in the ground. It wants well-drained soil and a little richer than we normally do, so it's more of a garden plant. I prefer growing it in a pot because if you want it to flower, then you really need to make sure that you get a little more nutrients into it and probably fertilize it, or make sure you put a little extra compost on it in order to get it to flower. Classically, we only look for the white flower for medicine. The other ones can be used, but they start to get some freaky hybrids that they sell at Home Depot. I don't know what those are. It's pretty. So it's a beautiful flower, fern-like leaves, and the flowers are what's called diaphoretic and are used to make you break a sweat for colds and flu. The leaves are styptic. Hi, Robocolor. The leaves are styptic, which is fancy talk for stop bleeding. They're antimicrobial, so we'll actually use that for a wound wash, or even pack it into a wound, or just use it for abrasions and things like that. And the roots are used primarily for toothaches because it also has a pain-killing property in the root. So it also helps with infection and so forth. And all parts do everything. And then there's some cool spiritual things that you can do with yarrow as well, that it's used to keep the dead off of you. And so the Romans would use that a few years ago. They'd stick it up their nose to stop nosebleeds if they got smacked upside the head and they're fighting for hours on end. But it was also because there was so much death that it would follow them home. So Renee's actually created a smudge spray, if you will, for the first responders in Orlando, and now it's used by some in Colorado and probably other places. Those are the two we know of. That they're sitting there doing CPR on somebody and they don't make it. They sometimes feel like those folks follow them home, and so a little salt and yarrow spray goes a long way. And we've even used that on clients at the clinic that sometimes they literally feel like their dead grandmother is following them around, and they like their grandmother, but she needs to go away. That we'll have them take a bath or something in yarrow that can be really helpful. Purple Perillia, this is a cool Chinese herb. There's I think we got some pots, but there's some out back. Purple Perillia. This is a Chinese. I don't have any of my Chinese. All those people. I probably got somebody who knows Chinese stuff. So Zisiya is the Chinese name, and Shiso is the Japanese name for it. And it's funny, a lot of people know Shiso better than they know the Chinese name for it. It was classically added to sushi along with like pickled ginger and some wasabi. So in Chinese medicine, we use it for seafood poisoning. So there's actually an herb, a formula in my formula book, which is ginger and perillia, which you would take if you just had some bad fish. But that's literally what they put on the sushi. So they're actually putting like, it tastes so good. No, it's stopping you from dying. So this one, it's funny, it's related to basil. And so it grows just like basil. So when you grow perillia, think basil. And up north, no, full sun. Basil doesn't like full sun. Like I'd say part sun to even part shade, you can get away with it. But also, for any of you who've ever grown basil, it's like, oh my God, it's like so high, and it's sweet basil, right? Sweet Italian basil. It's so good. And then it starts to put out a little flower stalk on it. And it's like, it's still good, but it gets a little acrid, a little more intense. Most plants do that. So once they put their energy into reproduction, the chemistry of them changes. So think about lettuce, the same thing, right? It's like, oh, I'm getting this wonderful lettuce that I planted, yum, 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 and then it bolts, which I don't know why we call it something different. It goes to flower, right? Puts out a pretty flower. Now it tastes like crap. We throw it in the compost pile. So with the basil, here in Florida, you can keep basil going for a year or two or longer sometimes. And if you keep clipping the flower stalk, two things will happen. It'll stay nice tasting. And B, every time you clip it, it will split in two.
Mm.
So you end up from a basil plant to a basil bush and it rocks. Yeah.
I have a Thai basil bush.
Same thing.
It's, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a bush now, right? So Perillia, same thing. And so at that said, at some point, I always let it go to seed because it will reseed itself. Where basil, it's a little bit harder. Sometimes it doesn't always do that. But the Perillia, it's beautiful because it is purple. It's like green and purple. And so you have this little blanket of green and purple all over your yard. I think it's stunning. You can totally make pesto out of it. It's a little intense. So I would mix it half and half with regular sweet basil. Besides the seafood poisoning, if you have holy basil, yay, holy basil, we say is good for everything. It's still basil. And so it is for stress or tense conditions. It makes everything okay. Perillia is slightly less strong. So we use it for everything from bloating and tension in the stomach to stress. And so it's a tea, it's a funky tea, but it's okay. And you can just walk by and eat it too. I keep wanting to hit my slide. I was like, no, that's all the people there. Passion flower. So there's two different types of passion flower. There's many types of passion flower. Let me back that up. There's two that we commonly see here in Florida. The Passiflora incarnata is a native plant. It is the herb of commerce, and it's what we use. Like if you go and say, I want some passion flower tea, that's what you're buying, incarnata. Literally, you can find it all over the place inland, and it grows like gangbusters here. It's hard to get fruit from it. So you need two different plants in order to get fruit, even though you get pretty flowers. All parts of the incarnata are medicine. A lot of people like the passion flower or the passion fruit, in which case there's another species, edibilis, which the fruit has some of the anxiolytic, the relaxing anti-anxiety properties. And so like when we have it, it's literally, I think it came from our neighbors, but now we have our own. It came over the fence, another tree, it ate our tamarind tree, and then it was like trailing all over the place. There was hundreds of fruit, like up north where you get zucchini dropped on your it's like a weed that people can't give it away fast enough. That's what we do with passion flower or passion fruit. And so I had this nighttime routine. I like my late night snacks, you can tell. And I would eat one fruit at night, and it's got this sweet and sour. It's like a sweet and sour tart thingy. And it would just take the edge off to quiet the mind so you could go to sleep. And so the passion flower tea doesn't taste amazing. I think the fruit is super yummy. And if you've never eaten one, they're too expensive in the store. Find a friend. And right time of year, come by the clinic. We literally give them away. So you cut the top off is the easy way to do it. It's a very hard, leathery fruit. And then just get a spoon, and there's pulp with seeds. It's kind of a yellow to orangey fruit pulp in there. And you just scoop it out, eat it, seeds and all. The seeds are good for you. And it just kind of like settles you down. The incarnata, you use more the leaves and the flowers. And it's very specific for anxiety. And a key indication is circular thinking. So they're like, oh my God, and you're the same thing, running around in circles, that little crazy monkey running around inside your brain. Passion flower is so specific. You can use it for any kind of anxiety kind of thing, but it's so effective for that. So edibilis, just the fruit, incarnata, we use all parts of the plant, but especially the leaves. Oh, and how do you grow that? Oh, you can find both for sale in a store. It's important to ask which one you're getting. They both can be aggressive growers. The edibilis especially will literally run for days. It's easy to control, but it is going to take over your entire fence and everything attached to it. It's easy to cut it back. It is beneficial to actually cut both the incarnata and the edibilis, to go back to its base and cut it at the end of the season and let it regrow fresh. It actually likes full sun. It's hard to transplant. It's very doable. Between our if you haven't seen How's Your Day Honey, is our neighbor, so we get lots of honey, and she grows a billion different flowers, and one of us grew some incarnata, passiflora incarnata, in kind of the strip between our houses, between our driveways, and so it runs under the ground and then pops up all over the place. And so you can kind of get a little bit, you need a good foot of the runner to transplant it, but it handles full sun. And once it's like watered in for a week, then don't touch it. Leave it alone. Doesn't need fertilizer, doesn't need water, unless it curls up, it doesn't need anything. Yeah.
What about for pests? Something's eating mine like, in its trail.
So pests, there are some caterpillars that really like both the passion flowers. If it's an established plant, let them eat it.
It's new, that's why.
If there's trails, that's somebody else. That's not a caterpillar. The caterpillars will they eat your leaf literally down to the nubs when it comes back. That's probably some sort of a slug. One of two things. Most likely is you're overwatering, and so the slugs don't like dry; they like wet. But look under the undersides, look around the base. These hide in there somewhere. And also, you don't need to mulch passion flower. It likes well-drained, crappy soil. So we like it because it is. And even if you're like, oh, the stupid slug or whatever killed it's not necessarily dead. You've even got the option, if it's in the ground and it's like, no, it has a good root base, cut it and throw the slimy parts away or the leaves, and it'll come back the next season. Yeah, passion flower is weird. I took a bunch of edibilis fruit that we had, and I was like, no, I love the fruit. So I threw a bunch of it out here and I stomped on it. That's how I planted it. I literally went into the sandy, full sun places, and I went, and then I walked away. And most of it didn't come up, but I was out weed whacking today and trying to hack a path through there. And I saw like a half a dozen passion flower plants coming up. And there was another edibilis that I planted over on the inside of the fence there, hoping it would grow on that inside fence. And the caterpillars were having a field day. I was like, meh, it'll come back. They got to eat too.
When does the fruit come in?
That should be in the fall. Correct me if you want on that, Renee, because I think it's in the fall that it starts to come, in like early fall. And the whole time that it's growing, I literally like, oh, look, there's fruit. That's how I find out. The most beautiful flowers ever. And I don't have a picture of. Passion flower is not an aphrodisiac per se, even though it has the word passion in it. It's named after Passion of Christ. Looks like the crown of thorns.
Hey, Bob,
The
edibilis can go twice. Like right now it's blowing up.
Oh yeah, that
Sometimes-
doesn't surprise me.
Sometimes even 3 times. It just depends on the sturdiness of it. I have one that was in another place that I lived for 20 years, and the base root was bigger than my leg, like coming out of the ground, and went over a house, and that thing would flower 4 times a year and go to fruit because it had that substantial food
Yeah.
like store from the stock. So right now, the one in the back is going.
Is it got fruit on it?
Yes, it's got 100 of it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, check the clinic for fruit in another week.
Yeah, and so we're about 4 months out from the last like overdose.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So buy annually or quarterly, even if it's super
Yeah.
happy.
It seemed like we had it for 6 months. We were picking fruit.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
that's why I was like, I don't remember what it happened.
I think we can't judge our yard because it's a marked botanical spot and
Yeah.
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I think we're lucky that it's super happy in direct sun, but it's also reached over onto the big pine that's like 50 foot tall, that huge one to the side, and
Yeah.
starting to go over the creek into the park.
It is a bully. You have to hack it back sometimes.
Well,
Good as
it also, to me, it's also saying how happy it is, and that
Yeah.
could be why we're getting a second fruit. We have several people who have said online in the chat that theirs is fruiting right now.
Oh, nice. Okay. See, I haven't walked back with Herb Day and everything going on in the last month or so. I literally barely walked into our yard, which is a sad statement. So passion flower, it's like I said, it's Passion of Christ kind of idea. That said, it's used as an aphrodisiac for people who can't quiet their mind down. So if it's like, am I doing it right? And they're like, oh, I got to stop thinking about work, blah, blah, blah. Then it's helpful for being present. And so it's really helpful for focusing the mind and being present in the 1,000 different ways that may manifest. Ashwagandha, it's so funny. We should have ashwagandha farms in Florida. So like, obviously we get ashwagandha from India. It is considered Indian ginseng. It's in every adaptogen adrenal formula you've ever seen. I've gotten up to 6-foot roots out of it. That was an anomaly. And it is the root that we use from this plant. You can grow it from seed. I think we've got a couple small plants that I grew from seed right now. I'm not sure if I saw any out there today. If not, we probably have in the clinic if they're left over from Herb Day. It'll say full sun. I don't find that it likes full sun. Half and half or dappled light does great. There are a number of critters that love the leaves and branches. The caterpillars in particular. I think the one we've got in the yard right now is maybe 4 years old. It's this high. I don't even want to guess at how long the root is because it's in a mound. So it's got pretty fruit on it. I will put a caution on it. It is a nightshade. It's in the Solanaceae family. And so for anybody who's sensitive to nightshades, I do not recommend that plant. You can grow it, it won't attack you, but I find that once you get it established, I have had the caterpillars at least 2 or 3 times a year completely eat every leaf on it. And I go, oh, I hope I didn't lose it. I wonder if I should dig it up. And then 2 weeks later, the leaves pop up again. So once it's established, I don't fertilize it. I don't mulch it. I water it occasionally if it needs it. But really easy to get going. And again, if you're going to dig it up, that's awesome. You got fresh ashwagandha root. But the reality is, like, grow it to know it. It's a fascinating plant. It puts out lots of fruit. You can propagate those seeds on your own. They are viable. And if you're using it as an herb for yourself to manage stress or depleted whatever, China and India kind of have similar problems, and there's a lot of adulteration in the herbal industry, all of their industry, and there's a lot of pollution in both of those countries. And so for something like that, to be able to grow that here, where we can control the quality control and make sure that it's organically grown and so forth, we're going to not only get fresher, and fresh counts when it comes to herbs. It's like if you've ever smelled or not smelled old mint versus, oh my God, freshly dried or freshly off the vine, it's like this amazing intense smell. How long does it take for an ashwagandha root to be harvested, dried, cut and sifted, shipped to the wholesaler here, for me to buy it from the wholesaler to go onto my shelf? It's oftentimes a year. from the time it's harvested to the time that it shows up in your tea. So I think it's important that many of these as possible we grow ourselves, and then we know exactly where it came from. Bacopa, no, buy my Bacopa. It's a weed. It's all over the place. So it's Bacopa montanari. That is the herb of commerce. It's known as Brahmi, which we know it from India. So Brahmi is kind of a powerful thing. That's like one of their highest gods. And so this is a powerful, powerful herb. It grows in marshy areas in full sun. So you'll find it alongside an old creek bed, sewer outlet, street drains. If you have a low spot in your yard and you're watering your yard like with a sprinkler system, it's probably growing in there. The problem is, if you have this beautifully manicured yard that you're watering, you might also be using fertilizer and other creepy stuff. And if you're harvesting it from some sewer drain or creek bed, that's probably really disgusting. So one of the things that we tend to do is we try to find it from as clean a place as we can, but even then I don't trust it. We'll pull it out, we'll propagate it, cut fresh growth off, and then grow from that fresh growth. Yeah.
Bob, I'm raising my hand when you have a chance.
Yo.
So I have two things. I have something from somebody and something I want to say. I know where our Gotu Kola is growing unencumbered with no fertilizer in Gulfport.
Oh, cool.
At a public place. So if anybody wants to go and get it, I'm happy to tell them. It's bizarre, but I'll tell
You're
them.
an herb ahead of me.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that's what you were talking about. You were talking about Bacopa.
Bacopa. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so
Bacopa
sorry.
montanari.
I'm so sorry. My brain morphed them together. You know why. So come back to that. And then the other one, whenever you have a chance, I have a question about another plant you're not talking about. So just let me know if you have. Okay. I'm muting again.
Yeah. So if you can grow it in a pot. It wants wet feet. So just make sure you either water it a lot or get some sort of a saucer or something that you keep a little moist. And it can totally dry out. It'll do fine. The Bacopa is for its brain food. So I remember talking to an Ayurvedic guy. He grew up in India. He was like, he was so excited because it was like, no, every day before school, they would grind up squish up a fresh teaspoon of it, and they would eat that before they went to school so that they would do better in school. And he was very specific, never after 2 p.m. because it was almost too stimulating and too focusing. So definitely one of those things that we always put into many of our brain formulas for stuff. Gotu Kola is another Ayurvedic herb and a companion plant. We always say Gotu Kola is more drying, Bacopa is more moistening. And so we'll change the ratio of those two plants. We almost always use them together and adjust it to the individual. The Gotu Kola also brain food, but also used specifically for connective tissue. And I would say connective tissue or brain-related tissues that are inflammatory. So we've used Gotu Kola with pretty good success with things like autism and severe autism, TBIs and things like that. And again, a memory is its primary way we think about it. Gotu Kola doesn't need as much moisture. I use it as a ground cover in our garden to keep the weeds down. You can put it in a hanging pot or hanging pot. It'll actually kind of trail out. It's really pretty. Whether you want it to or not, may do that. And personally, I think it tastes good. I'll walk out in the garden some mornings and I'll just grab up a handful and just stuff it in my face and just eat it like it was lettuce. We've got it growing in the clinic in the back in the garden there that I'll walk out there. It's like, all right, I need a break. And I just go out and eat a leaf or two. I try to eat something live off the plant every day. It's kind of my morning routine. It's oftentimes Gotu Kola because I need more brain power. And it's not a rhizome because it's above the ground. I don't know. So you'll actually find like it'll have a little runner. There we go. That's a runner, and it puts up some leaves. And so every one of those you can cut and make a new plant. And so it'll put down little roots. And so super easy to propagate, move it around to different places. Although it wants nice soil, well drained, and so not rich, but at least some amendment to the soil is preferable. It will not grow well over mulch. So if you're getting mulch, it'll tolerate it, but the mulch will actually smother it. So be careful with mulch around it. It would rather just go through your lawn. And I'm running out of time. Renee, you said you had another plant you wanted, and by the way,
We have a
gotu
few,
kola.
we have a few questions from
Okay,
people.
there's two types of gotu kola that grow in Florida. The invasive, but the herb of commerce. Although I think I found it growing now, kind of naturalized, is Centella asiatica. There is a Florida native, which is Centella. This is gotu kola, Centella erectus, which has an upright shovel-like leaf. They're used interchangeably, and it's easier to grow the herb of commerce, the Centella asiatica. And then I'm going to skip around. Ask your questions because we only got 15 minutes, and I'm like, oh my God, we're right at time.
Okay, and so I have extreme answers for most of it. So if
Make
you
them
don't,
short.
if you don't know, then just tell me. I'm not going to say it. I'll like you're teaching. Tell
Yeah.
me if you know.
Nope.
Okay, so the first one is somebody has a son who's growing carnivorous plants.
Cool.
Do you have any medicinal value for those?
Yes, but that's complicated.
Well, I was going to say I do have an answer to this that's similar
Yeah,
to yours.
both the pitcher plant and the Venus flytrap are both used medicinally. And I want to say it's
So are sundew, which
and
are
sundew is, yeah.
indigenous to here,
Thank you.
but they all
Yeah.
have a massive toxicity.
Yeah, it's they're used for like cancer and that I have not worked with any of those plants. I've grown them because they're cool, but I haven't worked with them medicinally. I know of them.
I have worked with the sundew, but it comes to me from my traditional training.
Hmm.
And I do know of its toxicity because every time I do anything with it, the elder freaks out and makes sure I didn't eat it. And so, yeah, and so that's one of the reasons. And so I can speak on that a little bit. And the other one is true rabbit tobacco, which I know a lot about the medicinal
Yeah.
values of that. So it's up to you.
No, you can holler at that one. And that's a weed. We don't usually propagate the rabbit tobacco, but so that's a native that's oftentimes in the sandy, sunny spots of your yard, the rabbit
Well, they're
tobacco.
actually talking about true rabbit tobacco and not cudweed.
Oh, okay.
And so true rabbit tobacco is very difficult to grow here. The rabbit tobacco that's used here is cudweed, but I'm going to speak on its principles anyways, because it has the same principles as the Florida rabbit tobacco. And so in a general sense, it's a holy plant that's supposed to be used to send prayers up or to heal people who are very, very sick. But from a medicinal value, it's anything from boils and skin lesions, very specific to skin related items, to feverous infections. So it would be used many times as a wash or lesions and boils and things that would not heal, like hard to heal. Again, think damp, hot infections. Very specifically internally for respiratory infections, somewhat dealing again with water and fever. So a respiratory infection where you're coughing up chunky, oozy stuff and you have a fever, and also related to delirium, so that it would be used in sweat if they thought somebody was actually in psychosis, that they would put them in the sweat lodge, try to purge them of the illness, and then help bring their spirit back into their body. But it was very medical, that it was somebody who was actually having a break. And generally, when it's written about from an ethnobotany term, it's fevers who have caused that break and that delirium, or fevers that have caused a child to have a seizure and they can't get them quite back, that they'll give them a tea and they'll have them continually drink the tea and then do a steam and put the steam in front of them. So even here in Florida, the other rabbit tobacco would have been used that way. And there's not a lot of sweat lodge going on in the Florida tribes. They used it a different way. And so respiratory infections, washes for infections that are oozy, so eye or skin, and anything with a fever and lots of moisture. And it's very, very much used as a medicine as well as something that's holy.
Okay.
Yeah. Tea
Is
is
that it?
fine. Yeah, that was the two that were the thing, and then some
Okay.
other people helped answer the questions for each other.
Okay.
So it was-
Oh, yes.
Could Renee just say like the true rabbit tobacco, the Latin name?
And as Renee, do you remember the Latin names of our local species and then the true Latin, the true species? Because I don't remember the Latin names on those.
yeah, like I'll write them into the chat, and then if, I guess they're not on the chat, are they?
Nuh-uh.
Okay, so let me type it in.
Go ahead and double check them and then shout it out.
But I'm curious as to what kind she's
Yeah, and I'm not sure.
I can no, I can totally.
Just shout it out in a minute.
Well, it's a super hard one to say because it's from a it's like pseudodagnaphalium. Like it's really hard to say. Like pseudodagnaphalium is what I'm thinking. And I'll try to write it down. And Bob, I'll write it down to you, and then you can write it on the board. I'll personally
Okay.
send it. Does that make sense? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I want to talk about the lavender. I'm going to skip a few here, so I apologize, just because time is short. Lavender. There's 3 types of lavender we generally look at here in Florida: the English lavender, the French fringed lavender, and the Spanish lavender. Good luck with the English lavender. It belongs in England where it's foggy and cool. So yes, you can get away with it for a little while, but it's work. The French fringed lavender is pretty easy to find and generally the easy one to grow. And I'm going to give you a few tricks on it. The Spanish lavender, I've only seen it once and I can't find it anymore. And so I'm pissed. So anybody has some, I want cutting. One of the tricks with lavender, like if you plant it in like October, it'll do wonderful right on through another month. And then it usually dies. It'll usually get some mold or fungus on it because once our high humidity comes back, once our heavy rains start plopping down and just drowns it, it's so many plants aren't designed for that. So one of the ways that I've found that works to combat that for any number of plants, and sage, like stuff your turkey sage, which is also medicinal, specific for sore throats, and lavender. If after you plant it, and even if it's in a pot, if it's outdoors, put a layer of white sand, just regular, whether it's beach sand or whatever, I don't care. But put a layer of sand and then get some seashells, like clam shells or oyster shells or whatever, but with the inside part down, and put that about a ½ inch or so off the stem and put that around. What happens is, as the rains come, instead of hitting the dirt and splashing up the good black dirt up onto your plant and killing it, it will hit the seashell and run down. And so I've managed to keep them alive through multiple blooms and through a couple of seasons by doing that. And if you're lucky enough to find Spanish lavender, go for it. French fringe lavender you can find pretty regularly almost anywhere. And so any of those are great. It will oftentimes say full sun. It's a lie. That's great for France. Here, I would say part shade to part sun, or dappled light works really well. Lemon balm, and I'm going to say I bring that one up just because of mints. Mint in general, lemon balm is a type of a mint. Generally shade to lemon balm in particular doesn't want sun. So I'd say dappled light to part shade to shade. And that's true for many of your mints. They will not tolerate full sun usually. They like richer soil and not wet feet per se, but they want moister soil. So you don't need to make sure they're well drained. Up north, like mint ate my yard. That ain't gonna happen here. Don't worry. You should be so lucky. And lemon balm, if you didn't know it, is a wonderful tea. Think lemon mint. It's also a gentle calming without being sedating and specific for the herpes virus. And so that's all herpes virus, from oral to genital to shingles. Lemon balm specifically. Rosemary, it's so funny. If you're going to choose like I have a brown thumb, go with rosemary, because if you take care of it, you'll kill it. Totally neglect it. Don't buy it from Publix. So rosemary grows on the cracks of rocks on the coast of the Mediterranean. So you don't need fancy soil. It'll take a little bit of amendment, but it doesn't want a lot. It does not need to be mulched, nor does it need to be watered. Like if it's in full sun and you water it more than once a week, you're going to kill it. So literally the least amount of care possible. Once it's established, i.e. you see a little bit of growth on it, go ahead and start harvesting it. In general, never, and opinions vary. If you're pruning, if you're harvesting, I like to keep it around a quarter of the length of a branch. So if you're like, yay, my rosemary is this big, like you take maybe that much off of it. So rosemary, yum. Make tea out of it. Remember, lemongrass. But it's both from aromatherapy. I used to have it outside our front door where I'd like rub it and just huff it, because it is a mental stimulant and is for remembering. And so if you're into Shakespeare, rosemary helps you remember your past, present, and know your future. You can also, it has some wonderful anti-cancer properties. So it helps to break down some of the carcinogens in barbecue. So adding rosemary into your marinade, use it to brush on your sauce, use the branches of it to make a shish kebab with, and every little bit helps, right? Because we still love barbecue. Sorry, I'm going to the more comfrey. If you have children or you do anything other than sit on the couch, you should grow comfrey. Do not use comfrey internally, but for sprains, strains, broken bones, it's magical. Literally will dramatically improve any healing time and reduce pain. And it is also, Renee mentioned it a little while ago, compost. So we would make what's a fertilizer or compost tea. Literally, you take the old rough looking leaves of the comfrey, mash them up and throw them in a bucket and let it rot. Throw in some oak leaves, throw in whatever else you think that's got nutrients in it, a little moringa, whatever you got. And then literally as it breaks down, you stir it up and that's what you fertilize your plants with. You can also use it for a rooting compound. So you can basically mash it up and then dip your roots in it if you're doing cuttings and things like that. And it helps with transplant shock as well.
So the tree,
The comfrey.
the plant Band-Aid that you were talking about.
Oh no, I don't use it for that, although it might work actually. I don't know, bad idea. For the plant Band-Aid, yeah.
Hey,
Um,
Bob.
I usually buy the store-bought stuff, unfortunately. Yeah,
Bob,
yes.
I'm taught in South America to bandage plants with other plants, like when we have to do like the dragon's blood in the fall. And very much I could see putting
Comfrey might work.
Pushing it in there, because we would have used a certain moss that has the same properties. They would have put it on a burn for us, and it's the key is to mush it in there so it stays in there correctly. So yeah, no, I don't think that would.
Yeah, I could see it. I just haven't tried it.
Yarrow, maybe.
Huh?
Yarrow.
Yarrow might work. I mean, there's a bunch. I haven't played with it like in South America. That a lot of those plants we wouldn't have here. The fun thing about comfrey, I've actually managed to grow it in full sun, but it's work. Definitely wants rich soil, but there's a really neat growing trick to it. Once it's established and, it's like it got big, broad leaves on it, is it kind of likes to get roughed up. So I'll go up, like if I'm like, oh, I'm going to do some cuttings, I'm going to propagate some plants. I'll go up to it about a month before I'm ready to start harvesting with my pitchfork. I'll stick it about 6 inches away from the plant, rough up the soil all around it, and it'll start to propagate on its own. And then I'll dig it up. And so it's got a taproot on it. And so longitudinal slices, as long as you have part of that top crown, part of that, every single one of those will grow. So I can take a single plant. It's already usually got a bunch of little pups off of the taproot. So I'll usually, if I do it, I rough up the soil, I'll usually start with 10 plants that I propagated. And then the main taproot, I can usually get 10 longitudinal slices all from one plant. And so really easy one to propagate once you get it going. Papalo, I don't know if, it's going to be dark out. I don't know if I have any papalo plants out there. This is a Mexican spice. If you hate cilantro, you will hate this plant. If you're like, cilantro's okay, it doesn't taste like soap. This is cilantro and crack. It self-propagates. It's a Mexican spice. It's culinary, but it's also for bloating, gas, and anti-parasitic. It's so yummy, and there are two types. I have the smaller leafed one, which I think tastes better. Actually, one of our students just brought me the other species that I haven't researched yet. I got the good one. What else do we want to talk about? Patchouli. Let's talk about patchouli really fast, and maybe curry tree, because I know it's already, oh my God, it's so late. Patchouli, like for real patchouli, screw the essential oils. The leaf is divine. It is very easy to propagate cuttings from it, like the easiest thing ever to do cuttings from. Shade. It will take dappled light or part shade, but it wants very little light. Rich soil. It is in the mint family. It's a Laminaceae. And I think mine at home, probably 4 feet tall now. So it's easily in a pot, not in a pot. It does great in the ground. Once it starts going, it goes like gangbusters. Curry tree. I'm going to say that one really fast. It can be kept in a pot and kept as a bush. It is, if you plant it in the ground, it's an understory tree. I think mine's maxed out now at about 30 feet or so. It's pretty, it seems to handle any amount of light. Ours literally is under the oaks and the pines and everything else, and it does just fine. It's been there at least 8 years, maybe longer. The leaves, it's not where curry comes from. Curry is a blend of spices. It's used in Southern Indian cooking, and throwing it in a pot of rice, in a stir fry, it's just divine. And a lot of spiritual uses as well. It would be kind of, it's not Olympia, but literally where they wipe you off. It is definitely used for that. And there's a couple out there. Obviously, we got some plants out there. Feel free to pull off a leaf and taste it. It's super cool. We don't use pesticides or anything, obviously. The rest are on here. Sorry, we don't have more time to cover all of those. There's too many plants. So the biggest thing is start small. Think about what your lifestyle allows you. If it's like, yeah, I'm got a balcony on my condo, then start with a pot and start with something really simple. Rosemary, like who doesn't need more of that? As much as you want to give it. Yeah, that's the nice thing. Most people are like, it's the full sun porch. And you know, give it a decent sized pot. And experiment, do one at a time. If this is all new to you, and remember, if you're from up north, the growing season is the opposite. And don't forget about the importance of the good soil bacteria. So bring a little of our soil into it. And that will make such a difference to incorporate some of those good bacteria into your soil. It's funny, and I'm sorry, you know, we'll have to schedule another time to do it. Talk to your plants. They care. Touch them. They like it. If some of you, you know, if you've been to some of our classes in the past, we've got the plant singing machines, where you can actually watch the plants respond to your stimulus. And you know, we haven't done that class in a while. We'll sucker Renee into it one of these days.
Yeah.
Because it is like, no, it's something we eat. Yeah, yes, it is. It is your food and medicine. It was what keeps us alive. It is a sentient being that gives itself to us. And so as we nurture those plants, we nurture the soil in order to bring that about. We want medicine from it. We want food. We want sustenance. We want it to keep us alive. So in the same way we give, if you say grace or anything like that, we give thanks for these things. Speak to it every day. Why would I walk? Somebody I know that I raised, you wouldn't walk by your child or your dog and not give them a nod and a hey. So you're going to raise this literally to provide you life. So say hey, give it a pat on the head, throw a little water at it every once in a while, and it's a nice routine. Getting your hands in the soil to propagate another living thing is a wonderful way to let away some of the stressors that we all carry with us, and they sometimes challenging times. So thank you all. I hope to see you in classes. If you guys got questions, I will hang. If you want plants, oh no, she's still out there. So, and I'll wander out there in a little bit and help you with planty stuff.
Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you all, the gang of people we have online. Oh, and this will be on YouTube in a couple days. Check out our YouTube channel, Traditional School of Herbal Studies.
Did you say that this was a prereq for the longer course?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, for the Western program, the Chinese, it's nice to take, but it's not required for the Chinese. The Chinese is start to finish. Yes, but it always comes down to 1,000 different things. Nettles would probably be the only other one I would say without like seeing the human.
Can I look out the window? The garden. Can I just look out the window?
I mean, you walk out there, whatever. It's just dark. And feel free to come by any day. You can come from First Avenue on the park.
Do you help with the
Yeah, like I see them in clinic during the day, and then even our student clinic has worked with a number of kids with autism. And everybody's every case is different.
Yes.
And I hate to say it, every family is different. Some people are so on the food and on the this, and other people are like, really, food makes a difference.
Yeah. Probably when my mom has celiac, I don't do dairy free as much as possible.
Yeah.
But my daughter.
Okay. Okay.
Moderate. So
Yeah, it just depends. Yeah, because like the spectrum, obviously, yada yada yada. But I'm gonna say sometimes we use Chinese herbs, sometimes Westerns, but always go to cola. Always the go-to cola. And the dosage is yes.
the dosage is yes.
Yeah, it's food.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you're not going to go wrong with that.
Wrong with it.
How much salad is too much salad? At
Yeah.
some point you get too much.
Yes. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. I'm glad you came.
Yes.
And I wish I could say I saw all the questions, but Renee was all over it online. So I saw her typing away. I'm sure her fingers are done. All right. I'm going to wander out there. Come visit us at the clinic or come see us in another class. And thank you all for joining us online. I'm going to sign us all. Actually, I'm going to leave it open in case Renee's still answering questions and such.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm happy to talk to you about the okra as medicine if you want. Are you still there?
I think she's talking to you.
Hi, I asked about the Nafolium, pseudo-Nafolium.
Yeah, I also see a question. I think it's from Sarah about the okra that I was saying.
I
saying.
don't
No, it's somebody who's online.
know where Sarah is.
It's somebody who's online.
I don't see Sarah Love.
And
Oh,
I'm
I'm so
happy to talk to
sorry.
you about it. So Sarah, do you want me to talk to you about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was just, you don't have to give me like a full spiel. I was just curious because it was something he had touched on earlier where
Yeah, no, I'm
mine is growing so well right now. So
yeah, I'm happy to. So okra is part of what's called the Malvaceae family, and anything in that family relieves anything that's red and inflamed. So that could be something as easy as like GERD, like heartburn. It could be something as extreme as irritable bowel syndrome, but it also could be a burn. The other thing is that when you have a Malvaceae coat something, it's different than putting aloe on it because it's permeable and it feeds it, where the aloe would just cover it and take away some of the nutrients. So it's way more important that we are using something that's permeable when we're trying to heal a burn, or when you have gastric reflux, or you have irritable bowel, or anything that's like that. And so that's a thing that we would use that way as well. The other thing is that it can be dried and added to things, and it still holds those properties. It's called mucilaginous demulcent and emollient, and you could put it on something. So remember, anything inflamed. So what does inflamed look like to us? It could be a sunburn, it could be road rash, it could be a bug bite, but internally, inflammation is like chemotherapy and like really harsh things to our body. Anytime anyone says to you, like a doctor, well, you get that because of inflammation. Well, that's what that is. So just like if someone's not really wanting to eat it, making it dehydrated and making it a really good seasoning so that it will be like a crunchy snack, like a potato chip, that's a good way to go. But again, you can dry it and just put it in your mouth as powder, swallow it, and get the benefits in the big long tube all the way down. So that's an important thing to just kind of know in your life. So think anything red and inflamed, but you growing it, even the stems and leaf, you could chop it up and put it in the dehydrator or dry it out in the sun and jar it up and save it for later. Like, that's something that you could use during any time as part of just something you have in your first aid kit for many, many things, animals included, because if they lick it off, it doesn't matter. And so hot spots and skin disorders, if you have somebody that has a dry, itchy problem, you would add this to their formula. If they were constipated, you would add this to their formula. If you had anything that was in that category, regardless of internal, external, plus then it's healing the tissues because it's got so many nutrients. So absolutely too. And we can talk about, I see someone else asked about Kit, are you still there? Asked about herbs for COVID. And so the symptoms of COVID and pre-COVID symptoms are a dry, lingering cough that you can't get rid of. And so the okra we're talking about is very precise and specific like that. It would move phlegm that was out, that was stuck. We could also use Sida, S-I-D-A, that's something that grows very well in Florida, and Bidens, B-I-D-E-N, or Spanish needle. And so those are things that we definitely put into all of those formulas. And then plantain, Plantago major, not the banana. So plantain, again, moves mucus out, all of those things, including the okra. Wet up the mucus that's dried and adhered and move it up and out of the body. And so it's why the cough is lingering, because usually there was a fever and usually all the moisture was used up. So the phlegm gets stuck, and then that will get secondarily infected. And it's one of the reasons why we have such an issue and why it's not being kicked out, because normal medicines try to dry that all up so that you can breathe better. And if it's already dry and the germ is trapped there, it's not going to come out. So that's another way to deal with it. So that would be the Malvaceae, like the okra, cranberry, hibiscus, just plain hibiscus. And then we would say Sida, S-I-D-A, Sida, any of them, and they're like weeds, and there's a video on one of our on the YouTube channel showing you what it is. And then Plantago major, plantain, not the banana, but the plant, also a weed that's out in Florida, and also a video about it. And Bidens, or Spanish needle, all of those together even would be a great formula. And I think the vaccine, because that was the question that just popped up, I think the vaccine is correct for the person that it's correct for. So like if you're going to suffer more from getting the illness, if there's a possibility of death and not being able to breathe, if you have secondary conditions, then I encourage you very much to get the double dose vaccine, not the Johnson and Johnson. But if you're fairly healthy and you have a peer group that can care for you, like if you have access to us, and I think that it's your choice at that point, whether or not you want to get vaccinated. Either way, we have help for both of them. We have seen COVID and long haul COVID and COVID reactive from the vaccine from week one in the clinic and handled it with bells on, no problem. And throughout our nation, all the herbalists are working together for that as well. I would avoid the Johnson and Johnson for several reasons. For right now, I would go for the two shot, whichever one you choose if you were going to do it. Any other questions? And Sarah, you can ask another question. You look like you're full of questions. I could be wrong, but it looks like you had a lot to say. Yeah, the spice bush I'm happy to talk to you about, and I'll go over the concerns for the J&J for sure. So the spice bush is something that ceremonially we use, and I'm traditionally trained, and we would use it to bring a group together. We would use it for harmony. We would use it as our daily drink if we were struggling with a relationship or relationships, either at work or as a community as a whole. It's to bring people together, to sweeten the pot, to wake up and move out the things that are stuck. So it's really important, like as a whole, especially nowadays because we're so divided, that we do that, even in our relationships at home, because of staying home because of COVID. I'm sure it's strained. So we usually have it like a morning drink, or if we're coming together as a group. Like if you guys met with me as a group to talk about some traditional medicine, I would serve it to you just so your hearts were able to get the messages that you needed. And so it's a really strong plant for the community, and it does that for the garden, and it does that for the area too. They're very communal. So it helps to link the community together to have them work together as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful drink, and it is supposed to be harvested a special way and used in a special way, but it's no big deal. If you ever get your hands on spice bush and can use it, then just give me a holler and I'll tell you the traditional. Just send me a message and I'll tell you how to cut it and harvest it properly, like so that you're following the tradition of the Native Americans that would have used it. And so I have no problem doing that. And then the second question that's on the line was, what are my concerns about J&J? There's two things in particular. The first one is that if you really do need the vaccine, like if you truly are in need of the vaccine, that you're in that high risk group, or you're a first responder or a teacher and you're going to take the vaccine because you need it, it's not quite as strong at building the antibodies that we really need. But more than likely, you're going to need a booster 3 or 6 months ahead of time. I mean, like farther on. And that's not a bad thing. We need lots of boosters with lots of our vaccines. It's just something to be very aware of, that because of the way the second dose on, like the reason why the second dose makes everybody sick with the other two is because it's working. For our body to get sick, it means that our body recognizes that we were sick and it starts to produce its own antibodies. And then the vaccines basically dissipate and kind of leave our system, and our own antibodies have kicked in and started making our safety. And with the J&J, it just doesn't have quite the oomph as the other ones. And so it's not that it's wrong, it's just really truly less effective. So if you're going to do it, like, commit and just do it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the idea of why, like in our world, everything looks like a pattern. So the pattern that would cause you to have the blood clots or anything associated with blood, that pattern in that has other consequences that they're not dealing with or announcing. And it's not that they're hiding anything from you. It's that they don't understand. When we see stuck conditions, it has the tendency to have other issues come with it. And a blood clot is a stuck condition. So more than likely, it's causing other stuck conditions that aren't life or death. Therefore, it's not coming up. And so I don't want anybody to have a stuck condition with an illness that has stuck phlegm or stuck plaque. That's a very serious thing down the road. And they might not be able to see it because that's not how the medical establishment deals with things. So another stuck condition would be plaque in our arteries. Another stuck condition would be brain fog. Another stuck condition would be tight or rupturing tendons. So you see, those things wouldn't come up as a life or death item. And it might be something that later on down the road happens and we don't realize. And so I just rather not have that happen. And as a general a general practice, the other two vaccines have been studied for a very long time. We have COVID viruses, SARS viruses, And so those particular vaccines, whether anybody realizes or not, have been in the works for one of them for 10 years and the other one for almost 2 decades. So we really actually do know how that acts in the body. And it really is a very, very low side effect in comparison to averagely used vaccines. So I believe them to be a stronger vaccine for less of a side effect for right now. And you really actually do want to be a little sick when you take your vaccines, because your body, that means your body's it's having a stronger reaction naturally and building your immunity. So I hope I explained that properly and you could hear it. It's not that you're welcome. It's not that it's wrong. Like, go for it if that's the one, like you're afraid of getting sick with it, go for it. But I'm waiting for something else down the road to kind of crop up in this. I work with another doctor. She's a dear friend of mine and a specialist for John Hopkins, but she's a Cherokee and one of my indigenous teachers too. And she's working with a long haul clinic up in the New England area. And we're just not liking what we see, like some aches and pains that aren't going away, it's the connective tissue things that aren't going away. And so, it is what it is. It's saving your life, so it's not that big of a deal. But just, if you have a choice, pick the other two if you feel safe. Any other questions?
Hi.
Yes.
So I'm still here. I just am wanting to understand, when we were talking about the pseudonaphtalium, is it the sweet, so it's the sweet everlasting versus the cudweed? That's just what I was
No,
reading.
so let's talk to that. Let's talk about that in a general sense. So when all the Native Americans when all the indigenous folk that were past maybe Gainesville into the Georgia, Alabama, Carolina, up into the eastern seaboard, when they all had to run and disperse to run from like being put onto a reservation, the ones that made it down into Florida, it was all swamp. Like, the reason we can live here now is because we drained the swamp. And so the stuff that grew in the swamp, particular, was cudweed. The other thing is, in all other places, all cudweeds are used ceremonial, whether it's Celtic Viking, whether it's in Africa. And so the rabbit tobacco that can grow here is the Florida rabbit tobacco, which is cudweed. It can be all cudweed that grows here. The true rabbit tobacco that you ever always read about, if you were going to read about a Cherokee or a Blackfoot, up north rabbit tobacco, again, it's that group, that classification, that family. So really it's interchangeable, that all cudweeds can be considered to be rabbit tobacco, especially here in Florida. And up north, all true rabbit tobacco, all of them can be considered to be rabbit tobacco. Because what would happen is, literally on the other side of the mountain, or the other side of the creek, or the other side of the state, we would have different growing conditions. So only that one would grow there. And that tribe would be like, oh, you're crazy. This is rabbit tobacco. And so all of our ethnobotany tells us, but I'm actually trained, and my family's been here since the 1600s. So it's really about the one that grows closest to you. Because if you are in an area that is sorrow filled, let's use St. Pete for an example. If St. Pete was still having the protest and those young kids who are so hurt and so upset, then that rabbit tobacco in that area is going to know that. It's going to know the footprint. It's going to know the tears of that person. So then when they're using it as a holy thing and sending their prayers up and using it to help the body, even if it was a physical thing, the way I described, it's going to be the bodies in that area. So it will be more correct. It will dry up the lung correctly. It will help the boils correctly. It will help the broken spirit correctly, because it literally is experiencing the same thing that our body is experiencing. So it doesn't matter if you are particular to one, you use that one. That's the one for you. And don't let anyone talk you out of it. Because truly that's what it is. And none of that stuff is written down, because the indigenous folk are not going to tell some white explorer the true nature of that. So it's okay for you to go on, this one's for me. And that's the way to think about it.
Thank you so much for
No problem.
taking the time to talk about that. I really, really, really love cudweed rabbit tobacco.
Yeah,
So
then
thank you.
that's it. Then that's
And-
it. Then that's yours, and you live it and you be it. And that little fluff that's at the top is intoxicating and magic. So even
Yeah.
though you dry it, you save that fluff for very, very special times and for your medicine bag. And that's truly the thing that's gonna reach out and help you at times of need. And you'll know the time to use it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No
And good
problem.
night. Thank you for
Good
the call.
night.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you. Anyone else?
The garden's amazing.
Oh,
Of course,
thank
it's
you.
dark, but it's still
I was
fabulous.
gonna say, feel like the gates are closed here, but you can either walk around or just park on
Yeah.
first and you walk right in. We have to.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm not really from around here, but
Okay.
like I came up to Sarasota, but
Oh, God.
I'll check it another time.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to talk about the aloe? I'll totally talk about the aloe with you if you want to. The aloe in particular, so I grew up in Florida, so of course we know aloe for everything from burns to heartburn to, like, there's aloe every 32 seconds. It's like shitting around. We use all of the succulents the same way. The problem with the aloe in the old time, and I'm gonna make a joke about this, but it's true. The old timers using it to poop, like they're always on blood pressure medicines or pain medicines and they can't go to the bathroom, is that it doesn't allow any nutrients in. So if you're like drinking aloe juice with your meal, you're not getting any of those nutrients. It does its job really, really well. And it coats the internals really, really well because it seals it like a Band-Aid. And so you're not getting any nutrients when you take that at all. So it's very important that everybody understands that. So if you took medication with it, it's not going to work. The second thing is, like, let's use that on the outside. If you used it for a burn and it was a real burn, like a 2nd-degree burn, again, not permeable, and you may want that. But technically, with like blistered burns, we want them to breathe. So if it seals it and it seals that moisture in, it may be causing infection, just like we wouldn't tell you to put a salve on a burn either, for the same reason, like petroleum over it. So if you use something like the okra or the roselle, the hibiscus or plantain that had those mucilaginous properties, but it was breathable, you're still going to get a seal and a coolness on it. You're still going to get the tissue knitting, but it breathes. It allows things to pass back and forth. So even though that it's protecting it, that it absolutely positively allows for just the breath of the skin and the exchange of good nutrients. So you could even do a wash, like an herbal wash with it in it, and it would get the wash, but still seal it. And then Michael, I teach all of the Western herbal classes, all of the spiritual classes, and I'm mostly always there for these classes too. Just tonight, I'd been out of town for 2 days and I drove in from hours away. And so I was home because of that. I also teach mostly all the Thursday night classes, which are more explanatory. Like I'll go between medical and traditional healing as well. And so you'll always see my name on the class, and Bob and I almost always teach everything together. So I'm very much present in the Chinese classes if it's possible. And he will ask if there's anything like this that I would know as an expertise. But Thursday night classes and the Western program is majority me. And most the other things we share, and then Bob's majority Chinese, and most of the other things we share. Sarah, do you have another question? Oh, hold on, hun. Hold on. I'm not getting you. Try it now.
Hi,
Hey,
you hear me? Okay.
yeah, I got
I
you
was
now.
just saying, I'll probably think of more before I roll into the 101 class.
Okay, that's completely fine. And we're always completely down to answer these. Like if Bob posts this on YouTube and you go in and answer, I'll respond. Like every day I'll go in and respond and answer the questions. And if it comes up that somebody has a question there, it gives me a message. And even if, like, hypothetically, even if I'm driving and I see it, I'll try to answer. And so I'll answer no matter what with all of this. And so, in 101, this is something we talk about, because the most important thing, like if I never saw you ever again, my most important thing is that you can care for yourself without the government or a store or someone telling you what your food and your medicine is. And so I go over like body system. If you never see me again, you can walk outside and pick this off the ground, and that is going to save you, and you can always have that. So you can run me into the ground there if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, hun.
Thank you.
All
so
right. Anybody else have questions? So, so Michael, I will tell you, like, I hope you can hear me. So I want to make sure that you know. So I hope that you can hear me, Michael, and I want to make sure that you know that I am indigenously taught from two factions. And I'm for more than that. Like my native here, like my people wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for the Native Americans that were here. But I'm taught by a teacher who is her grandfather is the head of the First Nations church for all of Turtle Island. And I'm expected to speak in a certain way when I speak about the things that they have taught me, that lineage. And I'm also taught by South American tribes. And I go to South America and I stay with those tribes, and they are my friends and my family. And I'm expected to speak a certain way with them. Now, that being said, I am fully, graciously, and overwhelmingly aware of cultural appropriation. And when I speak about the things that are native, that are here, that the native tribes here would have used, it's because that's the way I stayed alive. And that's what my ancestors taught me. That's what my family taught me. So that you'll never have to worry about with me saying anything that's out of step with that, because I'm alive because my family was taught this by these people and kept alive, and therefore my ancestors taught me. And I'm very happy to say I'm very much a Viking woman that is Scottish and Irish. When you see me, you'll see that there's no mistaking that. And I'm sure where my genetic line comes from, but the essence of who I am for the past 300 years is this peninsula. And so there's a lot of weird things, a lot of West African medicine that I know because I was taught by Linde in West African medicine. I will never, ever claim to be indigenous. And if I teach you something indigenous, it's because a First Nations person told me to. That's the only time it will be said. And when I'm speaking about the Cherokee things that I've been taught from both Eastern Band and Western Band, I don't allow you guys to record it. I don't allow the stories to be told. I stay strictly with what my elders have taught me, and I will never step on those toes. So when I say something definitively, it's because I was taught that as my ancestors' teaching, and I make sure to very specific and precise about that I've been expected to do that since I was a small child from several different factions, from African, South and Central American, and from our Western and Eastern Band First Nations people. And so I'm just telling you that as a matter of when I speak definitively versus I've been told. And so I will never be one of those people that says something that you read in some book from some white woman in the city. In fact, I'm scared of it all of the time. So I hope that helps in some way. And I spend the first half of class telling my lineage and expecting you to be able to understand that you're now officially from that lineage. So I make that very clear in the first part of class. So I hope that helps you.
And Renee, it's 9 o'clock, so I say we shut it down.
So let me say real quick before you turn it off. All of you who have had questions, just email the questions or private message me.
Yes.
Or put them into the YouTube once the class. If you're not part of the school and you're not going to go to class, put it into that chat. It will tag me that somebody from this class needs more clarification, and I will go in there and answer those questions as well. And I hope to see you soon in something. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll have it up on YouTube, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. We should have it up on YouTube. Call it 2 days. I'm gonna have a day off tomorrow.
Okay, and Kit, I'll answer that question. I'll try to answer that for school and get that sent to you. Bob, if you need anything, because we're all signing off, to just call me, okay?
Yep, I've got almost everything shut down. I'll be out of here in 5 minutes and heading home.
All right, it's nice to see you all. I'll talk to you later.
All right, good night,
Bye-bye.
all.